They say never mix family and business. I should have listened, but I never expected my sister-in-law to go so far or to forget who my father was. I'm Olivia Chen, founder and CEO of SecureFlow, a cybersecurity company I built from the ground up. My brother David married Catherine Williams 5 years ago, and that's when my problems really began. Catherine came from old money and never let anyone forget it. She couldn't understand why I'd want to work when I could just marry well like she did. The fact that my company was becoming successful seemed to personally offend her. "It's cute that you play with computers," she'd say at family gatherings, "but wouldn't you rather focus on finding a husband?" What Catherine didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my father, Richard Chen, wasn't just a successful businessman. He was the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. We kept it quiet to avoid any appearance of favoritism in my business dealings. I wanted to succeed on my own merits. Dad understood. He'd taught me the value of hard work and integrity from an early age. "Success means nothing if you don't earn it honestly," he always said. SecureFlow started in my garage with just me and 2 laptops. Through years of hard work, it grew into a company valued at over $100 million, with contracts from major corporations and government agencies. We specialized in protecting sensitive data, something that would become ironically relevant later. Catherine's attitude changed when she realized how valuable SecureFlow had become. Suddenly, she was very interested in my little computer company. She started showing up at my office unannounced, asking questions about our contracts and corporate structure. "I'm just trying to understand the family business better," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. I should have seen it coming. The first sign of trouble came when one of our bank officers called about unusual activity on our corporate accounts. Someone had attempted to change the authorized signatories using documentation I'd never seen. The papers appeared legitimate, the bank officer explained, but something seemed off about the signatures. A quick investigation revealed similar attempts at other banks where SecureFlow held accounts. All used forged documents with surprisingly good replicas of my signature. I hired a private investigator who traced the attempts back to a law firm known for aggressive corporate takeovers, the same firm where Catherine's brother worked as a partner. Still, I had no solid proof of Catherine's involvement. Then she made her big move. I arrived at the office one morning to find the locks changed and a cease and desist letter taped to the door. According to the documents, I had signed over controlling interest in SecureFlow to Catherine 3 months ago. The forgeries were impressive. They included board meeting minutes, transfer agreements, and even personal emails that appeared to show me agreeing to the transfer due to health issues that made me unable to continue leading the company. Catherine was waiting in my office, my former office, according to her, with her brother Thomas and their legal team. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said, examining her manicured nails. "The documents are all legal. SecureFlow is mine now." I looked at the stack of forged papers on my desk. "Did you really think you'd get away with this?" "Get away with what?" She smiled. "You signed everything over to me. It's all perfectly documented. Those signatures are forged." "Prove it." Her smile widened. "By the time you do, I'll have changed everything. New board, new management, new direction for the company. It'll be too late." She was right about one thing: a normal legal challenge would take months or years to resolve. By then, she could strip the company bare. But Catherine had made 2 crucial mistakes. First, she'd forgotten what SecureFlow actually did. We were a cybersecurity company. Did she really think we didn't have records of every email, every document, every digital transaction? Our systems tracked everything, including metadata that would prove when documents were actually created. Second, and more importantly, she had no idea who my father was. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Catherine watched with amusement as I put it on speaker. "Hi Dad," I said when he answered. "Remember that favor you said I'd never ask for? I need it now." "What's wrong, Olivia?" My father's authoritative voice filled the room. "My sister-in-law and her brother have forged documents to steal SecureFlow. They're trying to take over a company that handles sensitive government contracts using fraudulent paperwork." There was a pause. When my father spoke again, his voice had changed to what we called his chairman tone. "Catherine Williams and Thomas Williams?" "Yes, sir. The same Thomas Williams who's been under SEC investigation for his role in 3 other suspicious corporate takeovers?" Catherine's smile vanished. Her brother's face went pale. "Put me on video," Dad commanded. I switched to video call and turned the phone so everyone could see the SEC chairman's face and his official office behind him. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Williams," he said formally. As chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, I am officially notifying you that you are under investigation for securities fraud, corporate theft, and multiple violations of federal law. Federal agents are already on their way to secure the premises and all documents. I suggest you contact your attorneys immediately. Catherine's lawyer dropped his pen, actually dropped it. Like in a movie, Thomas looked like he might faint. You can't, Catherine stammered. This is a private business matter. A private business matter involving forged documents, attempted theft of government contractors, and securities fraud. Dad corrected her. The SEC takes a very dim view of such activities. Within minutes, FBI agents arrived to secure the building and collect evidence. Catherine and Thomas were escorted out, their faces ashen. Their lawyers hurried after them, already distancing themselves from the scheme. The investigation moved quickly. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Not only had Catherine and Thomas forged documents, but they'd also attempted to manipulate Secure Flow's stock in preparation for a sale once they gained control. The metadata from our security systems proved when the documents were actually created. Security cameras showed Catherine accessing the office after hours to plant evidence. Email records revealed the entire conspiracy, including messages they thought were deleted. But the final nail in their coffin came from an unexpected source. Catherine's assistant, tired of her abusive behavior, turned over recordings of Catherine explicitly discussing the forged documents and laughing about how she would strip the company's assets once she gained control. The SEC investigation expanded to include Thomas's law firm, uncovering a pattern of similar takeover attempts. Several of his partners turned state's evidence, revealing a long-running scheme to target successful privately held companies. Catherine and Thomas were arrested 2 weeks later. The charges were severe: multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted corporate theft. Given the involvement of government contracts, federal prosecutors were pushing for maximum sentences. David, my brother, was devastated when he learned the full extent of his wife's crimes. I had no idea, he kept saying. She always talked about wanting to be part of the family business, but I never imagined. The divorce papers were filed before Catherine's arraignment. In the end, Catherine and Thomas both took plea deals. They each got 5 years in federal prison, plus significant fines. Their law firm collapsed as clients fled the scandal. The Williams family's old money couldn't save them from disgrace. But the story didn't end there. The attempted takeover had revealed some vulnerabilities in how we handled corporate governance. With Dad's advice, we implemented new security measures and transparency protocols. Secure Flow emerged stronger than ever. We also used the experience to develop new security products specifically designed to prevent corporate theft and fraud. The irony of Catherine's attempt to steal the company actually leading to its increased success wasn't lost on anyone. A year later, I sat in my office, my real office, looking at Secure Flow's latest valuation, $500 million. The attempted takeover and subsequent publicity had actually raised our profile in the cybersecurity industry. Companies that had never heard of us were now calling for our services. Dad stopped by that afternoon, no longer needing to keep his connection to me quiet. The story of how the SEC chairman's daughter had built a successful cybersecurity company on her own merits, only revealing the connection when forced to defend against theft, had become something of a legend in business circles. You know, he said, sitting across from my desk, I always knew you'd never ask for help unless it was absolutely necessary. You wanted to succeed on your own. I did, I agreed, but I'm glad you were there when I needed you. That's what family is supposed to be, there for each other, supporting each other honestly, not trying to steal from each other. We'd heard that Catherine wasn't doing well in prison. Her family had cut her off. Embarrassed by the scandal, Thomas's legal career was over, his reputation destroyed. They'd both have to rebuild their lives from scratch when they got out. David had moved on, focusing on his medical practice and slowly returning to family gatherings. The experience had changed him, made him more appreciative of genuine relationships over superficial status. As for me, I kept working, kept building, kept innovating. Secure Flow's success continued to grow, but now I made sure everyone knew it was earned through hard work and integrity, not connections or shortcuts. The attempted takeover taught me valuable lessons about trust, family, and the importance of building strong foundations. We implemented new security measures not just in our technology, but in our corporate structure and relationships. Every new employee now hears the story of how our own security systems helped save the company from theft. It's become part of our corporate culture, a reminder that integrity and innovation are our true assets. Catherine's prison sentence will end in a few years. Sometimes I wonder if she's learned anything from this experience. The last I heard, she spends her time in the prison library, reading books about corporate law, the whether for redemption or revenge. No one knows. The Williams family's old money and influence couldn't protect Catherine and Thomas from the consequences of their actions. Their attempt to steal what they couldn't earn legitimately cost them everything they already had. Dad still chairs the SEC, continuing his work to protect honest businesses from fraud and theft. Our relationship has grown stronger, no longer needing to hide our connection. He's proud not just of my success, but of how I handled the crisis, using legal means and proper channels even when faced with criminal behavior. Secure Flow continues to evolve and grow. We've opened offices internationally, developed new security products, and built a reputation for unshakable integrity. The company that Catherine tried to steal has become something far more valuable than she ever imagined. Last week, I received a letter from Catherine's prison address. I haven't opened it. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Instead, I added it to our company archive, a reminder that success built on fraud never lasts, but success built on integrity can withstand any attack. The plaque in our lobby reads, "Security through integrity," words that now carry extra meaning for everyone who knows our story. It's a daily reminder that the best defense against theft isn't just good technology, it's good character. As for that favor I asked from Dad, it remains the only time I've ever requested his help in business. That fact has become as much a part of our company's legend as the attempted takeover itself. It stands as proof that true success comes from earning it honestly, not from exploitation or theft. Catherine tried to steal a $100 million company and ended up in prison. Meanwhile, that same company, protected by integrity and innovation, has grown to 5 times its former value. There's a lesson there about karma, about the true nature of success, and about the importance of earning what you have. In the end, Catherine's greatest gift to Secure Flow was showing us how to become even stronger, more secure, and more committed to our principles. Sometimes the worst attacks lead to the best improvements in security, in business, and in character. The company she tried to steal has become a testament to everything she lacks: integrity, innovation, and earned success, and that's something that can never be stolen, no matter how good the forgeries are.
"Hank, honey, are you in the bathroom?" My voice echoed through the silent house as I dropped my suitcase by the door. "What are you talking about, Sarah? I'm at the office." Hank's voice crackled through the phone. A shiver ran down my spine as the sound of running water and soft humming drifted from the upstairs bathroom. My heart pounded louder with each step I took towards the stairs. "There's someone in our house, Hank," I whispered, but the line had gone silent. I bit back a wave of panic. With each creak of the stairs, my breath quickened. I reached the bathroom door and hesitated, my hand trembling as it grabbed the knob. I decided against it. Instead, I stepped quietly away and dialed Hank again. The sound still carried from the bathroom, deep and serene, like someone leisurely enjoying their time. My mind raced, grappling with 1,000 questions. Who could it be, and why here? I managed to slip downstairs without making any more noise, my legs feeling weak. I grabbed my purse and keys, glancing back once more toward the stairs. I hesitated, torn between leaving and confronting whatever was happening in my home. Finally, the fear won, and I bolted out the door, locking it behind me with trembling hands. Once in the car, I sat behind the wheel, my heart pounding. What if someone dangerous was inside? But the voice sounded calm, almost familiar, but not Hank's. I dialed Dana's number, fingers fumbling on the touchscreen. "Hey, Sarah, what's up?" Dana's voice brought an immediate sense of relief. "Dana, I need to come over. Something is really wrong." "Sure, come on over. What happened?" I'll explain when I get there." I pulled out of the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The drive to Dana's felt like a blur, my mind looping back to that humming, the water running. None of it made any sense. As soon as Dana opened the door, the floodgates broke. I told her everything, from returning a day early to finding someone in the house. "Are you sure it wasn't Hank?" Dana finally asked, a mixture of concern and confusion on her face. "He said he was at work. Why would he lie about that? And the voice. It wasn't his, I'm certain." "That's crazy, Sarah. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, feeling the uncertainty gnaw at me as I sank into Dana's couch. "But I need to know what's going on." Dana placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." As that unsettling evening wore on, we brainstormed and speculated, yet no clear answers emerged. And in the silence, the echoes of that strange, serene humming haunted me, raising questions of trust and betrayal I never thought I'd need to face. Despite Dana's comforting presence, my mind kept returning to one thought. Who the hell was in my bathroom, and why? The next morning, I tried to bury my anxiety under a mountain of work. However, the memory of the previous night's events kept intruding. My nerves were on edge. At the office, I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for some sign that everything was normal. "Hank, could you pick up some groceries on your way home?" I texted him during lunch, hoping for a casual confirmation. "Sure, no problem," he replied almost immediately. His response felt off, too easy, too perfect. I couldn't help but question everything now. Back at home, Hank was already unloading groceries when I arrived. "Hey, got your message. What happened yesterday? You seemed pretty freaked out." I forced a smile. "Just a bad day at work, you know, stress and all." "Don't let it get to you," he said, patting my shoulder. "We'll have dinner and relax tonight." I nodded, but my mind was racing. As the evening went on, I started noticing the little things, traces of another presence. My face cream, always precisely where I left it, seemed slightly moved. My toothbrush was damp, even though I hadn't used it yet. "Hank, why does my face cream look like someone else has been using it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You're just imagining things, Sarah. You're stressed," he replied dismissively. Doubt crept further into my thoughts. I decided to take a closer look at his behavior. Over the next few days, subtle changes in the house became more apparent. Clothes folded differently, an extra wine glass in the dishwasher. Could I really be imagining it all? "Hank, what are you doing tomorrow while I'm at work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just working on a project. Nothing major," he replied, not even looking up from his laptop. "Anyone coming over?" I inquired, hoping to catch something in his response. "Just some friends, you know. Brainstorming," he said, his tone casual but evasive. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. So I did what any rational person wouldn't. I started keeping track. I began jotting down every odd detail, every little thing that seemed out of place. My notepad quickly filled up with dates, times, and observations. I was gathering evidence for reasons I didn't want to fully admit yet. Through it all, Hank remained oblivious, or maybe he just didn't care. His dismissive attitude only fueled my determination. He would realize soon enough that I wasn't just being paranoid. Each day the tension grew. No longer could I ignore the signs. I was working towards the truth, one unexplained glass, one moved object at a time. I felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. The real test came when I decided to confront him directly about our relationship without revealing my suspicions. One evening, as we both sat down for dinner, I looked him straight in the eye. "Hank, do you think everything's all right with us?" His reaction was immediate, a flash of surprise, quickly masked by his usual cool demeanor. "Of course, Sarah. Why wouldn't it be?" I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. It was clear now. This wasn't just about minor house discrepancies. This was a betrayal that went beyond my imagination, and I was determined to uncover the whole truth. I sat across from Dana at our favorite cafe, stirring my coffee absently. "You don't look good, Sarah. What's going on?" Dana's concern was palpable. "Hank, I know something is seriously wrong. Things keep changing around the house. He's acting weird." Dana leaned in, eyebrows knit together. "Like what?" "Little stuff. My face cream being used has extra wine glasses in the dishwasher, my toothbrush wet when I haven't used it." Dana sighed. "Sarah, you need to be sure. Have you asked him directly?" "Maybe he has friends over and isn't telling me, but it feels off." Dana nodded, considering. "Keep your eyes open. You know Hank. If it's something bad, it'll show." Back at home, I ramped up my vigilance. A sort of grim determination settled over me. I started keeping a detailed log, writing down every little thing that seemed off. Closets left ajar, furniture slightly shifted, my makeup drawer rearranged. Each discovery added fuel to the fire in my belly. "Hank, have you been having anyone over while I'm away?" I asked one evening, my voice steady. "Just some friends. You're being paranoid, Sarah. Stop stressing out over nothing." His dismissive words, paired with a patronizing tone, made my blood boil. "Friends, hun, they use my things?" I shot back, unable to mask my skepticism. "Sarah, get a grip. You're making something out of nothing. It's just stuff getting misplaced. Maybe you're losing it. I clenched my jaw and nodded, filing away another piece of his deceit in my mental ledger. Later, I found my favorite bracelet missing from its usual spot. It had been my grandmother's, and I never misplaced it. My heart sank. This wasn't just carelessness or imagination. Hank was lying. Talking to Dana helped cement my resolve. Keep a close eye on him, Sarah. Whatever's going on, you need real proof before you confront him. Over the next few days, more signs surfaced. Hank's sudden phone calls, always urgent and ending quickly when I walked into the room. His laptop, which he usually left open, now snapped shut each time I approached. I started going through his stuff when he wasn't home. It felt wrong, invasive, but necessary. One of his jackets turned up with a faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine. Heavier evidence. Marks of betrayal. Still, whenever I pressed him, Hank was swift to deflect. "You're imagining things," he repeated, brushing aside my concerns with maddening ease. It only hardened my resolve. He had to be hiding something, or someone. I painstakingly documented every suspicious detail, every snatch of conversation, until the collected weight of it was undeniable. I wasn't losing my mind. Hank was losing my trust. By the time the next business trip rolled around, I had one last resort. "Dana, I'm setting up cameras. I need to know." Dana's voice was firm. "Do it. No more guesswork. You deserve the truth." With that decision, my focus shifted from uncertainty to action. My house was no longer a home. It was a crime scene waiting to reveal Hank's betrayal, and when it did, I'd be ready. Setting up the hidden cameras felt strangely empowering. Dana was there helping me place them discreetly around the house. Each camera angle covered key areas: the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, and most importantly, our bedroom. "This is going to show the truth, Sarah," handing me a camera. "No more guessing." I nodded. "I just need to know." The next business trip loomed closer. I packed my bags with deliberate calm, all the while feeling a coil of tension tighten within me. Before leaving, I casually mentioned it to Hank, masking my true intent. "Leaving a day early, but back as usual. Shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Of course not," Hank said, barely looking up from his laptop. "Have a good trip." "Thanks," I replied, the word tasting bitter. From the hotel, I monitored the feeds obsessively. The first few days were uneventful, with Hank going about his usual routine. But then, on the fourth day, movement caught my eye. Hank entered the house, followed by a woman. My pulse quickened, anger and betrayal swelling within me. Dana was right. The guessing was over. "Hank, you bastard," I muttered to myself, watching them closely. The woman, Liz, sauntered around the house like she belonged there. They laughed, cooked together, and I felt my stomach churn, disappeared into our bedroom. It was all so casual, their intimacy a blatant mockery of my trust. I called Dana. "If this is what I think it is, I'm going to need your help. All of it. From beginning to end. We'll make sure they regret crossing you. Just say the word," Dana assured me. I hung up, fingers trembling. I watched the live feed as Hank and Liz lounged in my space, sharing kisses and whispered conversations. The anger seethed through me, but a fierce, cold determination took over. I spent the next hours capturing every moment on video, meticulously logging each betrayal. There was no denying it now. Hank's betrayal was real, and Liz was complicit. "Hank's going to pay," I whispered to myself, closing the laptop. "They both will." 2 days later, I returned home earlier than planned, Dana by my side. We parked down the street, out of sight. My heart pounded as I watched the live feed from my phone, confirming their presence inside. "Are you ready?" Dana asked, eyes steely with resolve. "Yes, this ends today." We moved quietly, inching closer to the front door. I took a deep breath and turned the handle, stepping into the entryway with deliberate calm. The muted sounds of laughter floated from upstairs, fueling my resolve. Dana and I crept up the stairs, each step a crescendo of their impending reckoning. Outside the bedroom door, I took a final breath and nodded to Dana. With a swift, decisive movement, I threw the door open. "Hank!" I shouted, voice cracking with the force of my rage. "What the hell is going on here?" Hank and Liz scrambled, sheets flying in a chaotic mess. The look on Hank's face twisted from shock to panic to an almost predictable guilt, while Liz tried to cover herself. My hands were steady as I pointed at them, phone recording every second. "How long has this been going on? While I'm out working to build our future, you're here doing this?" Hank stammered, trying to find words. but they caught in his throat. Liz looked terrified, realizing the gravity of the situation. The room fell into a tense, charged silence. The evidence was undeniable. The lies were exposed. There would be no more hiding, no more deceit. It was time for them both to face the consequences. Seeing Hank stutter and scramble for words filled me with a bitter satisfaction. I stood my ground, phone still recording, capturing every detail of his disgrace. Dana stood beside me, her presence a silent support. She crossed her arms, glaring at Hank and Liz. "Well, this is cozy." Hank's face turned ashen. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like," I scoffed. "Don't insult me, Hank. It's exactly what it looks like." Liz, clutching the sheets to her chest, finally found her voice, but it wavered. "Sarah, Save it, Liz." I cut her off, cold steel in my voice. "You made your choices." I turned to Dana, whose eyes burned with the same fire I felt. "Can you go through his electronics? Let's make sure there's no evidence left to destroy." Dana nodded, moving swiftly to Hank's desk where his laptop and phone lay. Her efficiency only highlighted Hank's pathetic attempts at explaining himself. "Sarah, please listen. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "What, getting caught?" I spat back. "Don't worry. I've been documenting everything, and it looks like today's show just completed my collection." Hank's eyes widened with realization. "You've been spying on me? Funny how I'm the bad guy now, isn't it?" I retorted. Dana tapped away on Hank's laptop, pausing occasionally to photograph messages and emails. "Yep, everything's here. This wasn't a one-time thing, Sarah." "Thank you, Dana," I said, turning back to Hank and Liz. "This ends now." I took a step forward, pointing at Liz. "Get out of my house. Now." Liz scrambled off the bed, gathering her clothes. She glanced at Hank, but he avoided her gaze, too ashamed to meet her eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "That makes two of us," I snapped, watching her fumble with her belongings. As she hurried out, Hank moved towards me, desperation in his eyes. "Sarah, please, we can talk this out." "Talk? You think talking's going to fix this? While I was out there working hard for our future, you were here, destroying it." Hank's shoulders slumped. "I know I messed up." "Messed up doesn't begin to cover it," I said, my voice rising. "It's over, Hank. I've got all the proof I need. You're not just losing me, you're losing everything." Dana walked over, handing me Hank's phone. "Here, take a look. It's worse than we thought." I scanned through the messages, my anger growing with each vile exchange. "You and Liz thought you could just play house while I was gone? Well, playtime's over." Hank's attempts at damage control were pitiful. "Sarah, I'm sorry." "Sorry's not good enough. You'll hear from my lawyer," I said, turning my back to him. "Don't bother trying to contact me. We're done." Leaving the bedroom, I felt an odd mix of rage and relief. As Dana and I walked out of the house, the weight of betrayal lifted, replaced by a fierce determination for justice. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew one thing for sure. Hank and Liz wouldn't escape the consequences of their actions. I replayed the moment in my head as Dana and I sat in her car outside my house. The image of Hank stammering, Liz scrambling, and their guilt was seared into my memory. My phone buzzed with notifications. Dana looked at me, concern etched on her face. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I will be," I replied, steeling myself for the next steps. "It's time for the confrontation." We drove to my parents' house where I'd planned how to reveal Hank's betrayal. My father, Timothy, greeted us at the door. His face hardened when he saw the expression on mine. "Sarah, what happened?" he asked. "Let's go inside. I have something to show you all," I said, my voice steady. Inside, I connected my phone to the TV and began playing the recorded videos. My mother, Eleanor, gasped as she watched Hank and Liz. "My God, Sarah," she murmured, shaking her head. Timothy's face was a mask of fury. "That bastard, this will not stand." "We need to make sure he faces the consequences," I said firmly. "I want a divorce, and I want him to suffer for what he did." Timothy nodded. "We have contacts. We'll make sure he doesn't come out of this unscathed. But are you sure this is the route you want to take?" "I'm more than sure," I said, feeling the weight of their support bolster me. The next morning, armed with my parents and Dana, I returned home. Hank was there, sitting in the living room, pale and apprehensive. "Sarah," he started, but I cut him off. "We need to talk," I said, setting the phone recording on the coffee table. As the video continued to play, Hank's eyes widened. He turned a shade paler. This isn't necessary, he tried, but his voice faltered. How long has this been going on, Hank? I demanded, voice cracking under the weight of emotion. While I'm out working to build our future, you're here doing this? Hank tried to fumble for excuses, but his words dissolved into stammers. His father, Robert, who had just arrived in support, looked at him, disgust etched into his features. This is unforgivable, son, Robert said, his voice clipped and cold. Liz walked in, trying to sneak past, but I stopped her with a glare. Liz, you're part of this too. You don't get to just walk away. Hank finally found his voice, weak and desperate. Sarah, we can work this out. I'll do whatever it takes. You already had your chance, Hank. You chose to break this. Now live with the consequences, I said, my heart hardened by the evidence I'd gathered. As I confronted them, my father contacted the lawyer we'd prepared, John Thompson. He laid out the groundwork for what would come next. Legal battles, financial retribution, public shaming. Hank's life, as he knew it, was about to unravel. Sarah, please, Hank begged, his voice breaking. I made a mistake. Give me another chance. I shook my head, the weight of my resolve pressing down. No more chances. You've lost everything that mattered. John handed me the final papers. This will ensure you get what you deserve, Sarah, and he will face the justice he tried to escape. Hank looked defeated, his pleas falling silent. Liz, terrified of the repercussions, realized the gravity of her actions. And as I walked out of that house, the burden of betrayal lifted, replaced by the clarity of my decision. Justice wouldn't be swift, but it would be thorough. Hank and Liz had chosen their path, and now they'd face the consequences. I was ready to see it through, resolute and unyielding. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Legal documents, meetings with my lawyer, and difficult conversations became my new routine. Every step I took was deliberate, every move calculated to ensure that Hank and Liz couldn't escape the fallout of their betrayal. One afternoon, Dana and I sat in the lawyer's office going over the final details. John Thompson, a sharp-eyed attorney with a no-nonsense demeanor, laid out the plan with practiced ease. We've documented everything thoroughly. With this evidence, we have a strong case for financial restitution and clear grounds for divorce. Hank's infidelity won't leave room for disputes. He assured me. Good, I replied, my voice steely. I want him to feel every consequence. Thompson gave a nod of agreement, pushing forward a stack of papers. These need your signatures. Once filed, Hank will be notified immediately. So I picked up the pen, the weight of my decision sinking in as I signed each document. Dana sat by my side, her presence a pillar of strength. After the meeting, Dana and I headed to a nearby cafe. As we waited for our drinks, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. Please, Sarah, we need to talk. I showed Dana the message. He's desperate, she said. But don't forget what he did. I won't, I replied, deleting the message without responding. 2 days later, Hank attempted to confront me at my office. I stood firm as he pleaded his case in the parking lot. Sarah, I'm begging you. We can work through this, he implored, his face a mask of desperation. I looked at him, my expression unwavering. You think you can get away with lying and cheating? Watch how I destroy everything you hold dear. Please, Sarah, I'll change. I'll do anything, he continued, his voice cracking. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me. This is your mess, Hank. Live with it. As Hank's world unraveled, so did Liz's. It turned out she was married too, her husband blindsided by the affair. She reached out to me, but I ignored her attempts at contact. She deserved no sympathy. Within a month, Hank's professional world started to crumble. My documentation and public exposure of his affair tarnished his reputation. Freelancing contracts dried up and clients vanished. He called me repeatedly, but I never picked up. One evening, Robert, Hank's father, called me. Sarah, I want you to know I support you. My son made his choices. He has to face the ramifications. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it, I said genuinely. Having his support meant a lot. Financially, Hank was sinking. John ensured my safety net was secure while Hank struggled to find stable work. I took control of our joint assets, leaving him scrambling. The public shaming was thorough. Hank's once polished image was now irrevocably smeared. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild. I focused on my career, surrounding myself with supportive friends and family. Each passing day, the weight of betrayal lessened, replaced by a sense of purpose and newfound strength. Dana stood with me every step of the way. One evening, as we sat on my porch with a bottle of wine, she raised her glass. To new beginnings, and to you, Sarah, you've come a long way. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking glasses with her. As I gazed at the night sky, a sense of closure settled in. Hank and Liz had tried to break me, but I emerged stronger, ready for a future that was now entirely my own. The legal battles finally concluded, and stepping out of the courthouse felt like shedding a heavy layer of skin. The divorce was finalized, assets were divided, and the truth was irrevocably documented. Dana and I met at our favorite cafe once more, where it all began. "So," she said, stirring her coffee, "how does it feel to be free?" I took a deep breath. "It feels liberating, but also a little scary." She squeezed my hand. "You're going to do great. Time to focus on you." As the days passed, Hank's attempts to contact me dwindled. He called, left messages, even sent letters, but I remained resolute. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old photos, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Hello?" I answered without checking. "Sarah, it's Hank. Please don't hang up," I sighed. "What do you want, Hank?" I'm sorry. Truly, I've lost everything." "And you think I should care?" He paused, the silence stretching. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging for a chance to make things right." I felt a pang of pity, but quickly pushed it aside. "You're too late, Hank. This is the bed you made. Now lie in it." I hung up, blocking his number. No more interruptions from the past. With Hank out of my life, I focused on building a new one. My career flourished, thanks in part to the intense drive that the betrayal had ignited. I took on new projects, connected with more clients, and even got a promotion at work. One evening, Dana and I decided it was time for a celebratory getaway. We booked a trip to a cozy cabin in the mountains. "Just you, me, and some wine," Dana declared as we packed our bags. The mountains were stunning, the air crisp and fresh. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. As we sat by the fireplace one night, Dana raised her glass. "To us, to new beginnings and leaving the past behind." "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling the warmth of the fire and the comfort of true friendship. Back home, my parents continued to be a rock for me. Timothy and Eleanor welcomed me with open arms every time I visited them. We talked about everything and nothing, reminiscing about happier times and looking forward to brighter days. At work, colleagues noticed the change in me. "You've been killing it lately, Sarah," my boss remarked during a meeting. "Keep it up." I nodded, feeling a newfound confidence. "Thanks, I plan to." I wasn't actively seeking a new relationship, but I started being open to the idea. If someone worthy came along, I'd be ready. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day at work, I sat on my porch, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I had my life back, and I had rebuilt it stronger than before. Dana joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "To good riddance, and to deserving the best," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "Good riddance to bad rubbish," I agreed. "I deserve someone who brings out the best in me, not the worst." And with that, we toasted to the future, ready for whatever came next. The sharp scent of coffee wafted through the small municipal office as I clutched the birth certificate form for my newborn daughter, Lily. The monotonous hum of the air conditioner filled the silence as I waited patiently in line. That's when I caught sight of him, my husband Jake, standing at the receptionist's counter with a young woman. My heart sank as I watched the petite blonde hand over a stack of papers, her body language far too casual for a professional interaction. Jake leaned in closer, whispering something that made her giggle. An icy chill ran down my spine. Why was he here? With her? "Jake," I called out, my voice wavering. He spun around, his eyes widening like a deer caught in headlights. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his face flushing crimson. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, struggling to control the tremor in my voice. "I thought you had an important meeting at work?" The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting between us. Jake cleared his throat, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "It's not what it looks like. This is Vanessa, a colleague. We were just..." "Just what, Jake?" I interjected, the pieces slowly falling into place. "Don't give me that crap. I'm not an idiot." Vanessa spoke up, her voice sickly sweet. "We were just filing the paperwork for my maternity leave," she said, patting her protruding belly. "Jake's been so supportive." The words hit me like a freight train. My legs nearly buckled beneath me as the reality sank in. Jake was having an affair, and his mistress was pregnant. I wanted to scream, to unleash the torrent of rage and betrayal swirling within me, but all I could muster was a strangled whisper. "How could you?" Before he could respond, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the tears streaming down my face. The life I thought I knew had crumbled in an instant, leaving me adrift in a sea of anguish and doubt. I couldn't stop replaying that haunting scene in my mind. Jake's panicked expression, Vanessa's smug smile as she cradled her swollen belly. How could the man who once promised me the world have betrayed me so callously? The memories of our early days together taunted me, a painful reminder of how far we'd drifted. I could still picture Jake down on one knee, his eyes brimming with adoration as he slipped that diamond ring on my trembling finger. "Marry me, Emma," he had said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's build something amazing together." In that moment, the world seemed filled with infinite possibilities, our dreams within reach. We were young and in love, ready to take on any challenge side by side. Jake had been my rock, my safe harbor in the turbulent storms of life. Now, as I paced restlessly around our bedroom, the very space we'd once shared felt like a prison cell, suffocating me with its memories. The lavish furnishings that had once symbolized our success now mocked me, reminders of the life I thought we had built together. I sank onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands as the sobs racked my body. "What happened to us, Jake?" I whispered brokenly into the stillness. His late nights at the office, his constant excuses, the growing distance between us, it all made sense now. While I had poured my heart and soul into supporting his career, he had been sneaking around with that woman. Anger flared within me, burning away the hurt and replacing it with a searing determination. I wouldn't be the one left broken and humiliated. Not this time. With a renewed sense of purpose, I wiped away my tears and reached for my phone. If Jake thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, he was sorely mistaken. I would uncover every sordid detail of his betrayal, and when I did, he would pay dearly for destroying the life we had built. As I dialed my brother Max's number, my hands trembled with a mixture of rage and resolve. "Max, I need your help," I said, my voice low and steady. "Jake's been having an affair, and I'm going to make him regret the day he ever looked at another woman." The sound of Jake's key turning in the lock made my heart pound with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I steeled myself, determined to confront him about his sickening betrayal. He sauntered in, his expression casual, as if nothing earth-shattering had occurred. "Hey, babe, you're up late," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I recoiled from his touch, bile rising in my throat. "Don't you dare babe me, you lying snake," I spat, my hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Jake blinked in surprise, his bravado faltering. "What's gotten into you?" "You know damn well what this is about," I hissed, jabbing an accusing finger at his chest. "I saw you today at the municipal office with your little mistress." His face paled, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out defensively. "Emma, you're overreacting. Vanessa is just a colleague, and we were—" "Save your pathetic excuses," I cut him off, my voice trembling with rage. "I'm not an idiot, Jake. I saw the way you were touching her, whispering in her ear like some love-struck teenager." He opened his mouth to protest, but I wasn't finished. "And let's not forget the fact that she's pregnant, shall we? Were you ever going to tell me about your little bundle of joy, or were you just going to keep stringing me along like a fool?" Jake's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "Vanessa and I have a professional relationship, nothing more. You're just being paranoid." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "Paranoid? You're calling me paranoid after I caught you red-handed with your mistress?" Stepping closer, I jabbed a finger into his chest again, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me make one thing crystal clear, Jake. I'm not going to sit back and let you humiliate me like this. I want the truth, and I want it now. Who is she, and what's really going on between you two?" Jake's jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually come clean. But then his expression hardened once more, and he turned away, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "I don't have time for this nonsense." As he stalked towards the bedroom door, I felt a surge of white-hot fury. "This isn't over, Jake." I called after him, my voice trembling with rage and determination. Believe me, I'm just getting started. The delicious aroma of Mom's homemade lasagna wafted through the air, but I couldn't bring myself to enjoy the familiar comfort of our family gatherings, not with the weight of Jake's betrayal hanging over me like a dark cloud. As my parents, Brother Max and his wife Sarah, chatted animatedly around the dining table, I found myself picking listlessly at my food, my appetite non-existent. Max must have sensed my distress because he soon excused himself from the conversation and slid into the chair beside me. "You've been awfully quiet tonight, sis," he murmured, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth to brush him off, but the words caught in my throat. Max had always been my confidant, my steadfast ally through life's ups and downs. If anyone could help me make sense of this nightmare, it was him. Taking a deep breath, I poured out the whole sordid tale, catching Jake at the municipal office with Vanessa, the revelation of her pregnancy, and the heated confrontation that followed. As the words tumbled out, tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously, determined not to break down in front of everyone. Max's expression darkened with each revelation, his jaw clenching in anger. "That lying bastard," he growled, slamming his fist on the table with enough force to make the plates rattle. "I'll kill him for what he's done to you." Sarah reached across the table, her eyes shining with sympathy as she gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this." Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances, their faces etched with sadness and concern. "Honey, are you sure about all this?" Dad asked hesitantly. "Maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding." I shook my head vehemently, my hands curling into fists in my lap. "No, Dad, there's no misunderstanding. I saw it with my own eyes. Jake's been having an affair, and now his mistress is pregnant." A heavy silence fell over the table as the weight of my words sank in. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she reached out to cradle my face in her hands. "Never doubt your worth, Emma," she said fiercely. "If that fool can't see the incredible woman he has, then he doesn't deserve you." Max nodded emphatically, his expression resolute. "She's right. You need to gather evidence, build a solid case against him. If he's cheating, you deserve to know the truth and get everything you're entitled to in the divorce." A fierce determination took root within me, hardening my resolve. Jake might have thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, but he was sorely mistaken. With my family's support, I would uncover every last sordid detail of his betrayal, and when I did, he would pay dearly for destroying the life we had built together. "You're right," I said, raising my chin defiantly. "It's time to take that lying snake down once and for all." The sleek black sedan pulled up outside the nondescript apartment complex, and my heart leapt into my throat. This was it, the moment of truth I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. With trembling hands, I killed the engine and stepped out onto the cracked pavement, my gaze fixed on the building's entrance. This was where Jake's mistress lived, the very place he had been sneaking off to for who knows how long. A part of me wanted to turn and run, to bury my head in the sand and pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But the fire of determination burned brighter, fueled by the hurt and rage that had been simmering within me since that fateful day at the municipal office. Squaring my shoulders, I marched towards the entrance, each step propelling me closer to the harsh reality I had been avoiding. The buzz of the intercom made my heart skip a beat, but I pressed the button for Vanessa's apartment with a steadiness that belied my inner turmoil. "Hello?" Her saccharine voice crackled through the speaker. "It's Emma," I responded, my voice surprisingly even. "We need to talk." There was a pregnant pause, and for a moment I thought she might refuse to buzz me in. But then the door clicked open, and I stepped inside, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, each step echoing like a death knell in my ears. Finally, I reached Vanessa's door and raised my fist to knock, but the sound of muffled voices from within made me pause. Pressing my ear to the door, I strained to make out the words, my heart pounding in my chest. "Can't keep doing this, Jake," Vanessa's voice filtered through, laced with exasperation. "She's going to find out eventually, and then what?" "She won't." Jake's familiar baritone responded, filled with a confidence that made my blood boil. "Emma's too caught up in her own little world to notice what's really going on." The casual dismissal of our marriage, of everything we had built together, was like a knife through my heart. Hot tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously, channeling my hurt into a simmering rage. Taking a deep breath, I raised my fist and pounded on the door, the sound reverberating through the hallway like a thunderclap. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, and then hurried footsteps approached from the other side. The door swung open, and there stood Jake, his expression a comical mixture of shock and guilt. Vanessa hovered behind him, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Emma," Jake stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "What are you doing here?" "What does it look like, Jake?" I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "I'm here to see your mistress and the child you've been keeping from me." Vanessa arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her lips curling into a smirk. "It's exactly what it looks like," she purred, resting a possessive hand on Jake's arm. Something inside me snapped at her brazen display, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled from my lips in a torrent of fury. "You lying, cheating bastard!" I screamed, advancing on Jake with fists clenched. "How could you do this to me, to our family?" Jake backed away, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Emma, please, it's not what it looks like. Let me explain." But I was past the point of listening to his excuses. Reaching into my purse, I withdrew the divorce papers I had prepared earlier and thrust them into his chest. "It's over, Jake," I growled, my voice trembling with rage and finality. "I want a divorce, and I'm going to take you for everything you're worth. Mark my words, you'll regret the day you ever looked at another woman." With those parting words, I spun on my heel and stormed out, my heart racing with a heady mixture of pain and vindictive satisfaction. The battle lines had been drawn, and I would stop at nothing to make Jake pay for his betrayal. The sharp scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I stepped into William's office, my heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. This was it. The moment I had been steeling myself for since that fateful confrontation with Jake and his mistress. William looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing at the sight of me. "Emma, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Drawing a steadying breath, I sank into the chair opposite him and recounted the whole sordid tale, from catching Jake at the municipal office to the explosive showdown at Vanessa's apartment. With each damning detail, William's expression grew darker, his jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "That lying, manipulative son of a bitch," he growled when I had finished, slamming his fist on the desk with enough force to make the coffee cups rattle. "How dare he do this to you and your daughter?" I flinched at the venom in his voice, a part of me still reeling from the reality of Jake's betrayal. But beneath the hurt, a newfound determination was taking root, fueled by William's righteous anger on my behalf. Reaching into my bag, I withdrew the divorce papers and slid them across the desk towards him. "I want to take him for everything he's worth," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "He's going to pay for what he's done, no matter what it takes." William nodded grimly, his eyes flashing with a fierce resolve that mirrored my own. "Don't worry, Emma. With the evidence we have, we can turn the tables entirely on that bastard." As he began poring over the paperwork, jotting down notes and muttering under his breath, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. William had been a pillar of strength through the darkest days of my marriage, always offering a sympathetic ear and sage advice. Now, as we delved into the legal minutiae of my divorce case, I found myself leaning on him more than ever. With each damning piece of evidence we uncovered, secret bank accounts, hidden assets, even a potential paternity scandal, the tangled web of Jake's deception grew more intricate and insidious. But with William by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. His fierce determination to see justice done for me and my daughter was like a beacon in the darkness, guiding us through the treacherous waters of the legal system. As the hours ticked by, the walls of William's office seemed to close in around us, cocooning us in a world where only our shared mission mattered. The rhythmic scratching of his pen on paper became a soothing mantra, punctuated by the occasional exclamation of triumph as we unearthed another damning piece of evidence. And through it all, a newfound sense of camaraderie blossomed between us, forged in the fires of shared adversity. As we pored over the documents, our heads bent together in quiet conspiracy, I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of William's conviction, his unwavering belief in the sanctity of justice. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our quest to make Jake answer for his betrayal. And as I met William's steady gaze, a glimmer of hope flickered to life within me, a promise that brighter days lay ahead. If only I had the courage to reach out and seize them. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves as I pulled into my parents' driveway, my heart heavy with a mixture of trepidation and grim satisfaction. So much had changed since that fateful day at the municipal office, and yet a part of me still clung to the desperate hope that things could be salvaged with Jake. That foolish notion was swiftly extinguished the moment I stepped through the front door and found him slumped on the couch, a pathetic shadow of his former self. His once immaculate suit hung loosely on his frame, his hair disheveled, and his eyes sunken with the weight of his rapidly unraveling life. "Emma," he croaked, struggling to his feet as I entered the living room. "Thank God you're here. We need to talk." I arched an eyebrow, silently appraising his sordid appearance. "Talk about what, Jake? Your mistress leaving you high and dry?" His face twisted in a grimace of pain, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Please, Emma," he implored, his voice a ragged whisper. "I need you back at the company. Everything's falling apart without you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. After everything you've done, you really think I'd come crawling back to help you?" "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake," he insisted, desperation seeping into his tone. "But we can fix this, Emma. We can make things right again, I swear." The earnestness in his voice almost made me waver, but then I caught sight of the framed photo on the mantelpiece, a frozen moment from happier times, back when our love seemed unbreakable. My jaw clenched as I remembered all the lies, the deceit, the utter disregard he had shown for our family. "Fix this," I echoed, my voice laced with contempt. "You destroyed us, Jake. And for what? A fling with some vapid little tart who couldn't care less about you now that you're broke." His shoulders slumped in defeat, and for a moment he seemed to age a decade before my very eyes. "I don't know what I was thinking," he mumbled, burying his face in his hands. "I've lost everything." A surge of vindictive satisfaction washed over me as I watched him crumble, finally reaping the consequences of his actions. This was the man who had once promised me the world, only to shatter those dreams with his selfish betrayal. "You're damn right. You've lost everything," I spat, advancing on him with eyes blazing. "The company, the house, the life we built together, it's all gone, thanks to your lies and your inability to keep it in your pants." Jake flinched as if I had struck him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Emma, please, I'm begging you. I need your help to get back on my feet." For a heartbeat, I almost wavered, the old familiar pull of love and loyalty tugging at my heart. But then I remembered the anguish of that confrontation, the cold, hard truth of his infidelity, and my resolve hardened like steel. "You destroyed us," I said, my voice low and unwavering. "Now face the consequences." With those parting words, I turned on my heel and strode out, leaving Jake to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. It was a harsh lesson, but one he had brought upon himself through his callous disregard for the family I had once cherished. As I climbed back into my car and pulled away from the curb, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. Jake's downfall was nearly complete, and soon I would be free to start anew, without the shadow of his betrayal looming over me. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure, but one that filled me with a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. The gentle morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the bedroom. As I blinked awake, a sense of peace washed over me, a feeling that had been sorely lacking in the tumultuous months since Jake's betrayal. Beside me, William slept soundly, his features relaxed, and a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come, from the tense early days of my divorce proceedings to the easy intimacy we now shared. Reaching out, I traced the contours of his face with a feather-light touch, my heart swelling with a tenderness I had thought long buried beneath the ashes of my shattered marriage. William had been my rock through it all, a steadfast ally in the fight for justice and a constant reminder that better days lay ahead. As if sensing my touch, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open to meet my gaze. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep. I leaned in to press a gentle kiss to his lips, savoring the simple contentment of the moment. "Morning, handsome." Propping himself up on one elbow, William studied me with a fond smile. "You look happy this morning." "I am happy," I replied, the words carrying a weight that seemed to lift a burden from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. His expression softened, and he reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "You deserve to be happy, Emma. After everything you've been through, you and your daughter deserve nothing less than the world." A lump formed in my throat at his words, and I had to blink back the tears that threatened to spill over. How could I have ever doubted fate's plan, thinking that Jake's betrayal was the end of the road? In truth, it had been the start of a new journey, one that had led me straight into the arms of a man who cherished me for who I was, a man who had fought tooth and nail to ensure that I received the justice I deserved. "You know, when I first walked into your office all those months ago, I never could have imagined we'd end up here," I confessed, tracing idle patterns on the sheets that pooled around his waist. William chuckled, that rich, warm sound that never failed to make my heart skip a beat. "Neither could I, but I'm certainly glad we did." Shifting closer, he gathered me into his embrace, his solid warmth a reassuring anchor in the midst of my turbulent emotions. "You're one of the strongest, most resilient women I've ever met, Emma, and I promise from this day forward I'll do everything in my power to make sure you and Lily never have to endure that kind of pain again." His solemn vow hung in the air between us, a poignant reminder of the battles we had weathered and the scars we bore. But in that moment, as I lost myself in the depths of his unwavering gaze, I knew that those scars were a testament to our strength, proof that we had emerged from the ashes of heartbreak stronger and more resolute than ever before. "I know you will," I whispered, sealing my faith with a searing kiss. As our bodies intertwined beneath the rumpled sheets, a new chapter began to unfold, one written in the language of hope, healing, and the undying promise of a future brighter than I could have ever imagined. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully free. "You lying, cheating bastard!" The words burned in my throat as I stared at the damning photos spread across our kitchen table. My husband Zach embracing my own sister Erin, the two people I trusted most in this world, entangled in a sordid affair. My hands shook as I flipped through image after image, each one a dagger to my heart. Zach's strong arms wrapped around Erin's slender waist, her hands caressing his face, staring into his eyes with undisguised lust, and the worst one, their lips locked in a passionate kiss, brazenly out in public without a care. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the photos to shreds, but I could only stand there, frozen, as the magnitude of their betrayal crashed over me in icy waves. 10 years, a decade of marriage, of love, of building a life together, did it mean nothing to him? And Erin, my baby sister, how could she do this to me? I practically raised her after Mom went back to work. She was my best friend, my confidant. I trusted her with everything. Bile rose in my throat as my mind raced, trying to process this nightmare. When did it start? All those late nights Zach was working. The weekends Erin would visit friends. God, how far back did this go? Have they been laughing at me this whole time? The naive, trusting fool? The front door slammed, and I heard Zach whistling as he walked in, so carefree, so unburdened. Oblivious to the bomb about to detonate our sham of a marriage. "Lana, you home, babe?" he called out from the foyer. "Babe." The casual endearment made me want to vomit. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out, my throat choked with anguish and rage. His footsteps approached the kitchen, and he sauntered in, his eyes widening as he took in my rigid stance and the photos littering the table. "Lana, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "Explain? Explain what?" I hissed, my voice shaking. "That you've been screwing my sister? That you two have been carrying on an affair behind my back?" Zach at least had the decency to blanch, his face draining of color. "It's not what it looks like." "Spare me the cliches," I spat. "I'm not an idiot, Zach. The pictures don't lie, even if you clearly do." He ran a hand over his face. Lana, please, just let me. How long? I demanded. How long have you been cheating on me with Aaron? He looked away, jaw clenched. The silence stretched between us, taut and suffocating. How long, Zach? I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. 6 months, he said quietly. It's been going on for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of deceit, of betrayal. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me. My knees buckled, and I gripped the table edge for support. I never meant to hurt you, Zach said, taking a step towards me. We never planned this, it just happened. Don't, I choked out, holding up a hand. Don't you dare try to justify this. Tears blurred my vision as the pain overwhelmed me. My husband, my sister, the 2 people I loved most had ripped my heart to shreds. They'd destroyed everything I held dear. In that moment, as I drowned in anguish and disbelief, one thought crystallized in my mind with blinding clarity. They would pay for this. Somehow, some way, I would make them suffer as deeply as I did now. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. I walked into my parents' lavish living room, my heart pounding against my rib cage. Zach and Aaron were already there, sitting together on the love seat, their hands intertwined. The sight made my stomach churn. My parents sat across from them, their faces etched with concern. They had no idea the bombshell about to be dropped. Lana, honey, what's this all about? Mom asked, her brow furrowed. Aaron said you had something important to discuss with all of us. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I bet she did. Probably couldn't wait to gloat. Aaron had the audacity to look confused. Gloat? Lana, what are you talking about? I threw the stack of photos on the coffee table. They fanned out, displaying in lurid detail the extent of Zach and Aaron's betrayal. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad leaned forward, his face reddening as he flipped through the images. Someone want to explain this? I asked, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. Zach and Aaron exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. Then Aaron turned to our parents, her eyes wide and tearful. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, she said, her voice trembling. But Zach and I, we're in love. I stared at her, aghast. The sheer nerve, the utter lack of remorse. In love, I repeated incredulously. He's my husband, Aaron, your brother-in-law. How could you do this to me? Aaron had the gall to look sympathetic. Lana, I never meant to hurt you. But the heart wants what it wants. Surely you can understand that. Understand? I shouted. You're my sister. I trusted you. Zach cleared his throat. Lana, please, let's be adults about this. Aaron and I didn't plan this, but we can't deny our feelings. I rounded on him, seething. Shut up, you lying, cheating scumbag. You don't get to lecture me on being an adult. Lana, language, Mom admonished, finally finding her voice. I know you're upset, but that's no way to speak to your husband. I gaped at her. Are you serious right now? He's been screwing Aaron for months, and you're worried about my language? Dad held up a hand. Enough. This is a lot to take in. He turned to Zach and Aaron, his expression stern. You two have put us in a very difficult position. We never meant to cause any trouble, Aaron said, all wounded innocence. But Zach and I, we want to be together. We were hoping for your blessing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Blessing? You want our parents' blessing to continue your sordid little affair? Mom reached out, placing a hand on my arm. Lana, honey, I know this is painful, but if Zach and Aaron have found love together, maybe it's for the best. These things happen. I yanked my arm away, staring at her in disbelief. Are you actually defending them? Choosing their side? We're not choosing sides, Dad said placatingly. But your mother has a point. If their feelings are genuine, who are we to stand in the way? I looked around the room at the faces of my family and saw nothing but pity and condescension. They actually bought Aaron's act, her crocodile tears and pretty lies. I can't believe this, I said, my voice hollow. My own family siding with the people who betrayed me. Aaron stood, moving towards me with outstretched arms. Lana, please, let's not fight. We're sisters. We can get through this. I recoiled from her touch. Don't. You're dead to me, both of you. I turned on my heel and stormed out, hot tears stinging my eyes. I heard my mother calling after me, but I didn't stop. Didn't look back. They had made their choice, chosen Zach and Aaron's love over my devastation. My own flesh and blood, so easily manipulated by a few well-placed tears and hollow justifications. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They thought they could just cast me aside, leave me broken and alone while they played happy families. They had no idea what I was capable of, the depths I would sink to make them pay. They wanted to cut me out, make me the villain in their sordid little drama? Fine, I would show them what a real villain looked like. The silence in my apartment was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, my only companion. It had been a week since my world imploded, a week since I'd walked out of my parents' house, disowned and betrayed. They'd made their choice, and it wasn't me. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my daze. I glanced at the screen, seeing a text from my best friend, Sarah. "Lana, I'm so sorry. I just heard about Zach and Aaron. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I let out a humorless laugh. Okay? I was the furthest thing from okay. My husband was screwing my sister, my family had taken their side, and I was utterly alone. I tossed the phone aside, ignoring the message. I couldn't deal with anyone's pity or platitudes right now. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe it was Zach, coming to beg for forgiveness. I yanked open the door, ready to unleash my fury, but it wasn't Zach standing there. It was a man in a crisp suit, holding a thick envelope. "Lana Owens?" he asked, his voice professional and detached. I nodded warily. "Yes, that's me." He held out the envelope. "You've been served." I took it with numb fingers, my heart sinking as I realized what it was. Divorce papers. Zach was actually filing for divorce. The man turned and left without another word, leaving me standing there, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. I stumbled back inside, ripping open the papers with shaking hands. There it was, in cold, legal terms. Zach was petitioning for a no-fault divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He wanted to split our assets evenly and move on with his life. With Aaron. Rage boiled up inside me, hot and all-consuming. How dare he? How dare he try to just walk away, like our 10 years together meant nothing? I grabbed my phone, dialing Zach's number with furious jabs. It rang once, twice, twat, before clicking over to voicemail. "You coward!" I screamed into the phone. "You think you can just serve me with divorce papers and wash your hands of me? You think you can just run off with my sister and live happily ever after?" I was pacing now, my voice rising with each word. "You destroyed our marriage, our life together. You betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now you want to just walk away like it never happened?" I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Well, think again, you bastard. You're not getting rid of me that easily. I won't let you just toss me aside like garbage." I ended the call, throwing the phone onto the couch. My chest heaved with the force of my anger, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. They thought they could just cut me out of their lives, out of the family. They thought they could leave me with nothing while they flaunted their affair, their love. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't some weak, pathetic victim who would just roll over and accept their scraps. No, I was Lana Owens, and I was going to make them pay for what they'd done to me. I glanced at the divorce papers, a cold smile curling my lips. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I could play dirty too. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the one I was looking for. A high-powered divorce attorney, known for his ruthless tactics and take-no-prisoners approach. If Zach and Aaron thought they could just waltz off into the sunset, they had another thing coming. I was going to fight them every step of the way, make their lives a living hell. They had no idea the storm that was coming for them. But they would soon enough. I walked into the dingy diner, the bell above the door announcing my arrival. The place was nearly empty, just a few scattered patrons nursing cups of coffee. I slid into a booth in the back, ignoring the sticky tabletop and torn vinyl seats. Places like this were perfect for clandestine meetings, no one paying any attention to the quiet conversations in shadowy corners. I drummed my fingers on the table, impatient. I checked my watch. He was late. Just as I was about to give up and leave, the door jingled again. A man walked in, his face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on me. He slid into the booth across from me, perhaps his movements furtive. "Lana Owens?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. "That's me, and you are?" He glanced around as if making sure no one was listening. "Call me John. I hear you're in need of some services." I leaned forward, my voice equally quiet. I need information. On Zach Andrews and Aaron Owens. John raised an eyebrow. Your husband and sister, right? The ones who screwed you over? I gritted my teeth at the blunt reminder. Yes, them. And what kind of information are we talking about here? I met his gaze, unflinching. Anything I can use against them. Dirt, secrets, skeletons in their closets. I want to know everything. John sat back, considering. That kind of intel doesn't come cheap, you know. It'll take time, resources. I pulled an envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. That's 10 grand. Consider it a down payment. He picked up the envelope, peeking inside. Satisfied, he tucked it into his jacket. All right, Mrs. Owens, you've got yourself a deal. We shook hands, sealing our agreement. I felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing I was one step closer to my revenge. As I walked out of the diner, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was my divorce attorney, Marcus. Lana, I've got some news, he said, his voice tinny through the speaker. Zach's filed a motion to have your assets frozen pending the divorce proceedings. I stopped in my tracks, anger surging through me. He what? He's claiming you're a flight risk, that you'll try to hide money or leave the country. The judge granted the motion. I saw red, my free hand clenching into a fist. That bastard! He's trying to cut me off, leave me with nothing. Marcus sighed. I'm afraid so. He's playing hardball, Lana. We need to be smart about this. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. Okay, we'll fight this. He's not going to get away with it. I'll do my best, but I have to warn you, it's an uphill battle. Zach has some high-powered attorneys on his side. Of course he did. Probably hired the best that his daddy's money could buy. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. Do whatever you have to, Marcus. I'm not going down without a fight. I ended the call, my mind racing. Zach thought he could just freeze me out, leave me destitute and helpless. But he had no idea who he was messing with. I scrolled through my contacts, finding the one I needed. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Lana? What's up? Claire, I need a favor, I said, my voice tight. A big one. Claire, my old college roommate turned successful journalist. Didn't hesitate. Name it. I took a deep breath. I need you to dig up everything you can on Zach. His business dealings, his finances, anything that could be used against him. There was a pause. Then, Lena, are you sure about this? It could get messy. I'm sure, I said, steel in my voice. He's trying to ruin me, Claire. I need to fight back with everything I've got. Okay, she said, her tone resolute. I'll see what I can find. I said, but Lana, be careful. Don't let this consume you. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. It's too late for that, Claire. This is war, and I intend to win, no matter what it takes. I sat at my computer, my fingers flying over the keys as I composed the email. It was a risk, I knew that, but it was a risk I had to take. I'd spent the last week combing through the information John and Claire had dug up on Zach. Bank statements, business records, emails. A paper trail of deceit and corruption. Zach had been embezzling money from his company for years, funneling it into offshore accounts. He'd been making shady deals, bribing officials, cutting corners, all while presenting himself as a pillar of the community, a loving husband and family man. It made me sick, knowing I'd been married to such a fraud, but it also gave me the ammunition I needed to take him down. I attached the incriminating files to the email, my finger hovering over the send button. This would go to the FBI, the IRS, the media, anyone who could expose Zach's crimes and bring him to justice. But I hesitated. As much as I wanted to see Zach pay for what he'd done, I knew this would also destroy my family. My parents, who had taken his side, who had believed his lies, they would be dragged through the mud right along with him. Was I really willing to do that? To burn down everything, even the innocent bystanders, in my quest for vengeance? A knock at the door startled me out of my thoughts. I minimized the email, my heart pounding. Who could it be at this hour? I crept to the door, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped. It was Erin. I yanked open the door, glaring at her. What the hell are you doing here? She pushed past me, inviting herself in. We need to talk, Lana. I slammed the door shut. I have nothing to say to you. Erin spun to face me, her expression pleading. Please, just hear me out. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this vendetta, this path you're on, it's not going to end well. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. And you care so much about my well-being, right? The sister who stole my husband, who ruined my life. She flinched but stood her ground. I'm not going to apologize for falling in love, Lana. I know it hurts, but sometimes these things just happen. I saw red, my hands clenching into fists. Falling in love? Is that what you call it? Betraying me? Lying to me? Sneaking around behind my back for months? Aaron had the audacity to look wounded. It wasn't like that. We never meant to hurt you. But you did, I screamed, the dam finally breaking. You destroyed everything. My marriage, my family, my whole damn life. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. Aaron reached for me, but I slapped her hand away. Don't you dare touch me, I hissed. You lost that right the second you climbed into bed with my husband. Erin's face hardened, her eyes flashing. Fine, you want to wallow in your bitterness and rage? Go ahead. But I'm warning you, Lana. If you go through with this, if you try to take Zach down, you'll only be hurting yourself in the end. I stepped closer, my voice low and deadly. Is that a threat? She met my gaze unflinchingly. It's a promise. Zach has powerful friends, Lana. People who won't take kindly to you dragging his name through the mud. You have no idea what you're up against. I smiled, cold and vicious. Neither do you, dear sister. Neither do you. I opened the door, gesturing for her to leave. Get out, and don't ever come back here again. Erin shook her head, her expression almost pitying. I hope you know what you're doing, Lana. I really do. She walked out, and I slammed the door behind her, sagging against it. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Erin thought she could intimidate me, scare me off with vague threats and warnings, but she underestimated me. They all did. I straightened, squaring my shoulders. I marched back to my computer, pulling up the email. My finger hovered over the mouse, just a single click away from sending Zach's world crashing down around him. Erin wanted to play hardball? Fine. Game on. I hit send, a grim smile stretching across my face. Let the chips fall where they may. I was all in, no matter the cost. I watched the news with a grim sense of satisfaction, the reporter's words washing over me like a twisted lullaby. Zachary Andrews, prominent businessman and philanthropist, was arrested today on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and bribery. FBI agents raided his office and home early this morning, seizing computers and files as evidence. If convicted, Andrews faces up to 20 years in prison. The screen flashed to footage of Zach being led out of his building in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and rage. Reporters swarmed around him, shouting questions, but he remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. I smiled, sipping my coffee. It had taken months, but I'd finally done it. I'd brought Zach's house of cards crashing down around him. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was my mother. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but some masochistic part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Hello, I answered, my voice cool and detached. Lana, what have you done? My mother's voice was shrill, panicked. The police are here. They're tearing the house apart. They're saying Erin is involved in Zach's crimes, that she's been embezzling from the family business. I leaned back in my chair, a thrill of vicious pleasure running through me. Well, looks like the golden child isn't so perfect after all. This is your doing, isn't it? You're behind all of this. I examined my nails, my tone bored. I didn't make Erin commit fraud, Mother. She did that all on her own. But you exposed her, exposed all of us. How could you do this to your own family? I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. My family? The same family that turned their backs on me, that chose Zach and Erin over their own daughter? Spare me the righteous indignation. Lana, please. We can fix this. We can make it right. Just tell the police it was a mistake, that Erin is innocent. I sat up straight, my voice turning to ice. Innocent? She slept with my husband, Mother. She betrayed me in the worst possible way, and you all took her side. We were wrong, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We were wrong, and we're sorry, but this, what you're doing, it's gone too far. I stood, pacing the room like a caged tiger. No, it hasn't gone far enough. Zach and Erin deserve to pay for what they did to me, and if that means burning down everything they care about, so be it. Even if it means destroying this family? Destroying your father's legacy? I stopped, staring out the window. Dad's legacy was a lie, Mother, a shiny veneer covering up the rot underneath. Erin made sure of that. There was a long pause, my mother's ragged breathing echoing down the line. I don't even know who you are anymore, Lana. What happened to my sweet little girl? I closed my eyes, a single tear slipping down my cheek. She died the day her husband and sister ripped her heart out. I'm what's left. I ended the call, tossing the phone aside. I knew I should feel something. Remorse, guilt, regret. But I only felt a grim sense of resolution. Zach and Aaron had built their perfect little world on a foundation of lies and betrayal. And I'd made it my mission to expose those lies, to make them face the consequences of their actions. My phone buzzed again, an incoming text from John. It's done. Zach's assets have been seized, his accounts frozen, Aaron's being questioned by the FBI as we speak. I smiled, a true, genuine smile. It was really happening. My revenge was complete. I knew there would be fallout, repercussions I couldn't even begin to predict. My family would never forgive me, my own reputation would be tarnished by association. But in that moment, as I watched Zach's mugshot flash across the screen, I couldn't bring myself to care. They had destroyed my life, my future. It was only fair that I returned the favor, an eye for an eye, as they say, and I'd made damn sure they paid their debt in full. I walked into the courtroom, my head held high, my designer suit impeccable. It had been 6 months since Zach's arrest, 6 months of watching his world crumble piece by piece, and today it all came to a head. Zach's sentencing hearing, where he would finally face the consequences of his actions. I took my seat in the front row, ignoring the whispers and stares from the packed gallery. I was a pariah now, the vengeful ex-wife who had brought down a pillar of the community. But I didn't care. Let them judge me. They had no idea the hell I'd been through, the betrayal I'd endured. The door at the back of the courtroom opened and Zach was led in, flanked by 2 bailiffs. He looked haggard, defeated, his once tailored suit hanging off his frame. Our eyes met for a brief moment and I saw a flicker of hatred, of fury. But it was quickly replaced by fear as he took his seat at the defendant's table. The judge entered, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair. She looked out over the courtroom, her gaze settling on Zach. Zachary Andrews, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and bribery. These are serious crimes, ones that undermine the very fabric of our society. Zach's lawyer stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets his actions and takes full responsibility. He has already made restitution to his victims and is committed to turning his life around. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain why Mr. Andrews continued to engage in illegal activities even after his arrest, attempting to hide assets and intimidate witnesses? Zach's face paled and he sank lower in his seat. I smiled to myself, remembering the anonymous tip I'd sent to the prosecutor's office. Nothing to say, Mr. Andrews? The judge shook her head. Very well. I hereby sentence you to 15 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years served. The gavel banged, and it was done. Zach was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. I stood, smoothing my skirt. It was over. I'd won. As I walked out of the courtroom, I was met by a sea of reporters, their cameras flashing, their questions overlapping. Mrs. Owens, how does it feel to see your ex-husband brought to justice? Do you have any comment on the rumors that you were behind the anonymous tips that led to his conviction? What about your sister, Erin? Sources say she's been committed to a psychiatric facility after suffering a breakdown. Do you feel responsible for her condition? I held up a hand, silencing the clamor. I looked directly into the cameras, my voice steady and clear. Zach Andrews is a liar and a cheat who destroyed countless lives with his greed and corruption. I take no pleasure in his downfall, but I do feel a sense of justice being served. I paused, letting my words sink in. As for my sister, Erin made her own choices. She chose to betray me, to lie and scheme and manipulate. Her fate is of her own making. I stepped forward, the reporters parting before me like the Red Sea. I know many of you see me as a villain, a woman scorned who went too far in her quest for revenge. But I assure you, everything I did for the sake of truth and justice. I smiled, cold and brittle. Zach and Erin thought they could destroy me, that they could take everything I loved and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. I walked away, my head held high, my heart empty. I had my revenge, my justice. But at what cost? As I climbed into my waiting car, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from my lawyer, with the subject line, Estate of Paul and Diane Owens. I opened it with shaking fingers, scanning the legalese. My parents had changed their will, leaving the entirety of their fortune to me. I leaned back in my seat, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. I had won, in every sense of the word. But as I stared out the window at the passing city, I couldn't help but wonder, was it worth it? Was any of it worth the price I'd paid, the pieces of myself I'd sacrificed on the altar of vengeance? I closed my eyes, a single tear slipping down my cheek. It was too late for such questions now. The die was cast. The game played out to its inevitable end. I was the last one standing, the queen of the ashes, and that would have to be enough. I stood in the foyer of my parents' mansion, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. The once grand house felt empty, lifeless, a mausoleum to a family long since fractured. It had been a month since the reading of the will, a month since I'd become the sole inheritor of the Owens fortune, a month since I'd lost everything that truly mattered. I walked through the echoing halls, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpets. Portraits of my ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow me, judging me. I entered my father's study, the room where he'd once held court, dispensing wisdom and discipline in equal measure. Now it was mine, the heavy oak desk bearing the weight of my new responsibilities. I sank into the leather chair, staring out the window at the manicured grounds. I had everything I'd ever wanted, wealth, power, status, but it all felt hollow, meaningless. My phone rang, startling me out of my reverie. I glanced at the screen, seeing an unknown number. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, rusty from disuse. Lana. The voice on the other end was achingly familiar, a ghost from my past. It's me. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Zach, how did you get this number? A humorless chuckle. Prison has a way of teaching you things, Lana, like how to pull strings, call in favors. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. What do you want, Zach? Haven't you done enough damage? A pause, then a sigh. I wanted to hear your voice. To tell you? I'm sorry. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Sorry? You're sorry? Do you have any idea what you've done to me, to this family? I know. Believe me, I know. His voice was heavy with regret. I was selfish and stupid, and I let my ego get the best of me. But I never meant to hurt you, Lana. I loved you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. You had a funny way of showing it. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life paying for my mistakes. But I needed you to know. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was with Aaron, even when I was betraying you, it was always you. I closed my eyes, a single tear slipping down my cheek. It's too late, Zach. Too much has happened, too much has been broken. I know, I needed you to hear it. To know that I'm sorry, that I'd give anything to go back and change what I did. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Goodbye, Zach. I hope you find peace wherever you end up. I hung up before he could respond, the phone clattering to the desk. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking with silent sobs. All of this, all the pain and destruction and betrayal, and for what? A hollow victory, an empty fortune, a shattered family. I stood, wiping my eyes. I walked to the window, staring out at the grounds that were now mine, the price of my vengeance, the spoils of my war. But as I looked out at the sprawling estate, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I had a chance now. A chance to start over, to rebuild. To take the broken pieces of my life and fashion them into something new, something better. I wouldn't let Zach and Aaron's betrayal define me, wouldn't let my quest for revenge consume me. I was more than that, stronger than that. I turned away from the window, squaring my shoulders. I had work to do, a legacy to honor, a future to build. I was Lana Owens, the last of my line, the keeper of my family's destiny, and I would not let them down. Not again. Not ever. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, into the unknown, into the rest of my life. It was time to let go of the past, to embrace the future, to find out who I was without the anger, without the pain, to finally truly live. Tonight, these two are heading to the other world, Greg said, his grin wide with malice as he stroked his mother's hand. My stomach churned, but I kept my face emotionless. My name is Sarah Harris, and this is the story of how I narrowly escaped a fate worse than death at the hands of the man I once loved. It all started when my friend Julia set me up with Greg, worried that at 35 I was still single. Greg was charming, successful, and seemingly hard-working, running his family's construction firm. Our whirlwind romance saw us married within 6 months, both of us eager to start a family. When our son Ethan was born, everything seemed perfect. But gradually, Greg's true colors began to show. He would come home late, sometimes not at all, claiming the stress of managing the debt-ridden company was overwhelming him. His rare appearances were marked by derogatory remarks, insisting that as a stay-at-home mom, I contributed nothing to the household. Despite my growing suspicions, I never imagined the depths of Greg's depravity until that fateful night when I overheard his conversation with his mother, Marcia. Their sinister plot to drug Ethan and me during our upcoming anniversary dinner and bury us alive at one of the construction sites chilled me to the bone. In that moment, I knew I had to act. I contacted a lawyer and the police, determined to bring this nightmare to an end. We devised a plan to catch Greg and Marcia red-handed, and as much as it pained me, I had to pretend everything was normal. The night of our anniversary celebration arrived, and Ethan and I played our parts perfectly. We feigned drinking the spiked beverages, collapsing as the drugs took effect. Greg's callousness as he loaded our unconscious bodies into his truck was sickening, but I held strong, waiting for the perfect moment. As he began burying us alive, my heart raced, but I knew the police were closing in. Just as Greg finished covering the graves, they swooped in, having tracked the truck's GPS. The look on his face as I sprang up, revealing the damning evidence I had recorded, will be forever etched in my memory. Greg and Marcia's arrest was a relief, but the true victory came in the courtroom, where they faced the consequences of their heinous actions. With their lengthy sentences and the implosion of the family business, justice was finally served. After the harrowing ordeal, I thought the nightmare was finally over. But Greg's true colors only became more apparent in the aftermath. "You're lucky I don't sue you for defamation," he spat during one of our mandated meetings to discuss the divorce proceedings, putting me through that humiliating charade just because you got jealous and paranoid. His words stung, but I refused to show any reaction. Deep down, I knew the truth. The recorded evidence of his despicable plot was undeniable. "I want full custody of Ethan," I stated firmly, "and a fair share of the assets from your family's business," Greg scoffed. "You think you deserve a penny after what you pulled? You'll be lucky if I don't take Ethan away from you entirely." His threats only strengthened my resolve. I would not let this man continue to manipulate and control me or jeopardize my son's well-being. Fortunately, my lawyer David was a formidable ally. "Your client's actions speak for themselves," he countered. "Mrs. Harris has more than enough grounds for full custody and a substantial settlement, unless you'd like this to go to trial." The thought of his misdeeds being publicly exposed seemed to give Greg pause. After some tense back and forth, we reached an agreement. I would get primary custody of Ethan, along with a sizable alimony payment from the liquidated assets of Greg's construction firm. As we finalized the paperwork, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction watching Greg's signature on the dotted line. His once charming facade had crumbled, revealing the true monster beneath. "This isn't over," he muttered darkly as he stormed out of the office. But for me, it was a new beginning. With the divorce finalized and Greg out of our lives for good, Ethan and I could finally start healing. The first few months were understandably difficult. Ethan had witnessed things no child should ever have to see, and there were nights when he would wake up screaming from nightmares. But we stuck together, sought counseling, and slowly but surely, the light began to return to his eyes. For my part, I made the decision to return to my previous career in marketing, a path I had set aside when Ethan was born. Juggling work and single parenthood was a challenge, but I found strength in knowing that I was doing it all for my son's sake. There were moments when I still struggled with the trauma of what Greg had put us through. The betrayal by someone I had loved and trusted so deeply left scars that may never fully heal. But I refused to let it define me or hold me back from giving Ethan the life he deserved. As the years passed, we grew stronger, closer, and more resilient. Greg's wrath had nearly torn us apart, but in the end it only served to forge an unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Despite the relief of finalizing the divorce and securing Ethan's safety, the wounds from Greg's betrayal ran deep. For months after, I would find myself repeatedly going over our credit card statements, analyzing every single charge with a scrutinizing eye. It was during one of those late nights, poring over the records, that a particular transaction made my blood run cold. An extravagant dinner for two at an upscale restaurant, followed by purchases at a high-end jewelry store. The dates matched up with one of the many nights Greg had claimed to be working late at the office. My mind raced with a sickening realization. This was far from the first time Greg had been unfaithful. As I dug deeper into the statements from previous years, more and more unexplained charges began to surface. Fancy hotels, lavish gifts, all paid for with money that should have gone towards supporting our family. The evidence was insurmountable. Greg's lies and infidelity had been going on for years, possibly even before Ethan was born. I felt sick to my stomach, waves of anger and humiliation crashing over me as I confronted the full extent of his deceit. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to confront him, to scream in rage until he understood the pain he had inflicted on me and our son. But I knew it would be futile. Greg was a master of manipulation, and any attempt at confrontation would only give him the opportunity to twist the narrative and make me the villain once again. Instead, I channeled my anger into determination. I would not let this break me. For Ethan's sake, I had to be strong. As the months passed, I focused all my energy on rebuilding our lives and creating a stable, loving home for my son. Whenever the pain and resentment threatened to overwhelm me, I would look at Ethan's smiling face and remind myself that he was all that mattered. It wasn't easy, especially as Ethan grew older and began to ask more questions about his father. "Why doesn't Dad ever come to see me?" he would ask, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. In those moments, I had to bite my tongue to keep from unleashing the full truth about Greg's despicable actions. As much as I wanted to shield Ethan from the harsh realities of his father's cruelty, I knew that one day he would need to know the truth. But for now, I focused on providing him with the love and stability that Greg had failed to offer. We created new traditions, just the two of us, weekend trips to the park, movie nights with his favorite snacks, and bedtime stories that always ended with a reminder of how much I loved him. Slowly but surely, the dark cloud of Greg's betrayal began to lift. With each passing year, the pain became a little more manageable, the anger a little less consuming. And through it all, Ethan remained my unwavering source of strength and resilience. No matter what challenges life threw our way, we faced them together, a mother and son bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. It was a warm summer evening, and Ethan was outside playing catch with one of the neighbors while I prepared dinner. The radio was on, filling the kitchen with a cheerful tune as I hummed along, finally feeling a sense of peace after years of turmoil. That's when I heard it, Greg's voice, clear as day, coming from the other room. At first I froze, my heart pounding as irrational fear gripped me. But then I realized it wasn't Greg himself, but rather a phone conversation he was having with his mother, Marcia. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept towards the living room, straining to make out their words. "Can't believe she actually thought she could take everything from me," Greg was saying, his voice laced with venom. "After all I've done for her and the brat." My blood boiled at his callous reference to Ethan, but I forced myself to stay silent, listening intently. "Don't worry, son," Marcia's voice crackled through the speaker. "We'll make sure they get what's coming to them." A chill ran down my spine as Greg let out a dark chuckle. "Oh, they will. I've got it all planned out. A nice little anniversary dinner for the three of us. A special drink to help them relax." Realization hit me like a ton of bricks as the pieces fell into place. The twisted smiles, the chilling words, they were plotting to drug Ethan and me, to do God knows what. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not this time. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I hit the record button, capturing every vile detail of their sinister plan. "Once they're out, we'll load them up and take a little trip out to the old brickyard construction site," Greg continued, his voice dripping with malice. "Bury them deep in the foundations. No one will ever find them." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. This was no empty threat. I knew Greg well enough to recognize the cold, calculated determination in his tone. But even as fear gripped my heart, a newfound resolve took hold. I would not let this monster hurt my son. Not again. The conversation went on, each twisted detail more horrifying than the last, but I forced myself to listen, to gather every shred of evidence I could. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the call ended. I stood there shaking, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I dialed the number I had committed to memory. Detective Carter, the woman who had helped me bring Greg's initial plot to light. Within hours, a plan was set in motion. We would play along, feigning ignorance of Greg's twisted scheme. And when the moment came, we would be ready, to expose his depravity once and for all, and ensure that this time there would be no escape. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Detective Carter and her team worked tirelessly, coordinating every detail to ensure our safety, while simultaneously gathering enough evidence to put Greg and Marcia away for good. "We'll have officers stationed nearby, but out of sight," Carter explained as we went over the plan one final time. "The moment you give the signal, we'll move in." I nodded, my heart pounding at the thought of finally putting an end to this nightmare. But more than anything, I was focused on keeping Ethan calm and protected. When the time came to break the news to him, I struggled to find the right words. How could I explain the depths of his father's depravity without shattering his innocence? In the end, I settled for a simplified version of the truth. "Daddy has done some very bad things," I told him, my voice trembling slightly. "But we're going to make sure he can't hurt us anymore." Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. But to his credit, he nodded bravely. "I trust you, Mom." Those 4 simple words nearly brought me to tears. After everything we'd been through, my son still looked at me with unwavering faith and love. It was that bond that gave me the strength to see this through. The days leading up to the anniversary dinner were tense, but we carried on as normal, feigning ignorance of Greg's twisted plot. Whenever he called to discuss the plans, I forced a cheerful tone, playing the part of the oblivious wife. "I can't wait to celebrate with you and Ethan," I lied through gritted teeth. "It's going to be such a special night." Greg's smug chuckle made my skin crawl. "Oh, it'll be a night you'll never forget, all right?" Finally, the dreaded evening arrived. As Ethan and I dressed for the occasion, I could see the fear in his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." He clung to me, his small body trembling slightly. In that moment, I silently vowed that no matter what it took, I would protect him from the monster that dared call himself his father. The drive to the restaurant was tense, Greg's malicious grin growing wider with every mile. But I refused to show any outward sign of distress, focusing instead on the plan, and the knowledge that justice was finally within reach. As we were seated at our table, Greg leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Enjoy your drinks," he hissed. "They've got a special kick to them." I swallowed hard, forcing a smile as I nodded in feigned eagerness. Across the table, Ethan's eyes met mine, and we shared a silent understanding. It was time. My heart pounded in my chest as I raised the glass to my lips, the liquid sloshing precariously close to the rim. Across the table, Ethan mirrored my movements, his small hands trembling ever so slightly. "To family," Greg sneered, his eyes glinting with malice as he clinked his glass against ours. I forced myself to maintain eye contact, refusing to show even a flicker of the fear and disgust that threatened to consume me. We had one chance to pull this off, and I couldn't afford any missteps. Slowly, deliberately, I tipped the glass back and let the spiked liquid pour down my throat. The bitter taste nearly made me gag, but I swallowed it down, fighting the urge to cough or sputter. Ethan followed suit, his face contorting slightly as the drug hit his system. For a heart-stopping moment, I feared he might break character, but he held strong, my brave, resilient boy. "Doesn't that feel nice and relaxing?" Greg crooned, his voice dripping with sadistic glee as he watched us slump in our chairs, feigning the effects of the potent sedative. I forced my eyelids to droop, my head lolling to the side as if I had lost consciousness. Every instinct screamed at me to stay alert, to fight back against this monster who dared call himself my husband. But I knew I had to play along, at least for now. The sound of Greg's chair scraping against the floor sent a jolt through me, but I remained perfectly still, my breathing shallow and even. "You two really are pathetic," he sneered, his voice growing fainter as he moved towards the exit. "But don't worry, I'll make sure you're taken care of, permanently." A twisted chuckle, and then the sound of the restaurant door swinging shut behind him. Only then did I dare to crack an eye open, scanning the room for any sign of the waitstaff or other patrons. But it was empty, just as Carter had promised. The entire place had been cleared out, save for the undercover officers posing as staff members. My gaze flickered to Ethan, and my heart swelled with a mix of pride and sorrow. No child should ever have to endure such a horrifying ordeal, and yet there he sat, slumped in his chair but alive and unharmed. I wanted nothing more than to pull him into my arms and reassure him that the nightmare was almost over. But I knew we couldn't risk breaking cover. Not yet. The minutes ticked by in agonizing silence, the only sound the muffled clink of dishes being cleared away by the staff. I strained my ears, waiting for the telltale sign that Greg had returned, ready to transport us to our would-be graves. And then, finally, it came. The familiar rumble of his truck's engine, growing louder as it pulled up to the entrance. "Showtime," a gruff voice murmured in my ear, and I felt a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Carter and her team were in position, ready to strike. The sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful, and then Greg's hulking form appeared in the doorway. He paused for a moment, surveying the scene with a twisted grin. "Like two little lambs to the slaughter," he sneered, moving towards Ethan's limp form. That was my cue. In one fluid motion, I shot upright in my chair, my eyes flying open as I fixed Greg with a steely glare. "That's enough," I growled, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "It's over, Greg. We've got you." For a split second, his cocky facade faltered, his eyes widening in shock and disbelief. But it was too late. Carter and her team were already swarming in, their guns trained squarely on him. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The monster had been caged at last, and this time there would be no escape. The look on Greg's face as the cuffs clicked into place was one I would never forget. A potent mix of shock, rage, and utter disbelief. For a moment, he simply stood there, gaping at me like a landed fish. You recorded me?" he finally sputtered, his eyes bulging with fury. "How dare you?" I met his gaze unflinchingly, emboldened by the knowledge that his reign of terror was finally at an end. "I did what I had to do to protect my son," I stated, my voice ringing with conviction. "From you." A muscle twitched in Greg's jaw, and for a split second, I thought he might try to lunge at me, but the firm grip of the officers on either side of him held him in place. "You'll pay for this," he spat, his words laced with venom. "You and that little brat. I'll make sure you both rot in hell." A chill ran down my spine at the pure malice in his tone, but I refused to let him see my fear. "Not anymore." "Save it for the judge," Carter interjected coolly, giving Greg a hard shove towards the exit. "You've got a lot of explaining to do." As they led him away, his curses and threats echoing down the hallway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for so long. It was over. We were safe. I turned to Ethan, who had remained silent throughout the entire confrontation, his eyes wide and fixed on the spot where his father had stood moments before. "Ethan?" I said softly, crouching down to meet his gaze. "It's okay now. He can't hurt us anymore." For a long moment, he simply stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he threw his arms around me, clinging to me with a desperation that made my heart ache. "I was so scared, Mommy," he whispered, his small body trembling against mine. "I thought he was going to." His voice trailed off, but I knew what he meant. The thought of Greg's twisted plans of what might have happened if we hadn't been able to stop him made me feel sick to my stomach. "Shh, it's all right," I murmured, stroking his hair as I fought back my own tears. "You were so brave, sweetheart. So brave." We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, mother and son united in our relief and our shared trauma. It would take time, I knew, for the wounds to fully heal. But in that moment, we had each other, and that was enough. As the dust settled and the adrenaline faded, the true weight of what we had accomplished began to sink in. Not only had we escaped Greg's clutches, but we had also secured the evidence needed to ensure he and his equally twisted mother would face the full consequences of their actions. The trial was, in many ways, even more harrowing than the initial ordeal. Listening to the sordid details of their plans, the casual disregard for human life, it was almost more than I could bear. But I forced myself to remain strong, if not for my own sake, then for Ethan's. And when the guilty verdicts were finally read, sentencing Greg and Marcia to lengthy prison terms, I felt a sense of vindication unlike any I'd ever experienced. Justice, at long last, had been served. In the aftermath, as we began to pick up the pieces and rebuild our lives, I found solace in the knowledge that we had persevered against the darkness. Greg's wrath had nearly consumed us, but in the end, it was our love and resilience that had prevailed. It would be a long road, I knew, but we would walk it together, a mother and son, forged in the fires of adversity, stronger and more unbreakable than ever before. With Greg and Marcia behind bars, Ethan and I could finally begin to rebuild our lives without the specter of their malice looming over us. Of course, the road ahead was far from easy. The scars of their betrayal ran deep, and there were times when the trauma threatened to overwhelm us both. But we faced those challenges head-on, seeking counseling and leaning on each other for strength and support. Slowly but surely, the nightmares that had plagued Ethan's sleep began to subside, and the light returned to his eyes. For my part, I made the decision to reclaim my career, dusting off my marketing degree and re-entering the workforce. Juggling work and single parenthood was a constant balancing act, but I found solace in the routine, in the knowledge that I was providing for my son and paving the way for a brighter future. Of course, there were moments when the weight of it all felt crushing. Times when I would catch a glimpse of a father and son walking hand in hand, and the ache of what Greg had robbed us of would hit me like a physical blow. But I refused to let those moments define us. Instead, I channeled that pain into creating new traditions and cherished memories, just the two of us. Weekend trips to the park, movie nights with Ethan's favorite snacks, and bedtime stories that always ended with a reminder of how much I loved him. These small moments became the building blocks of our new lives, and through it all, the bond between us only grew stronger. We were survivors, warriors who had faced the darkest depths of human cruelty and emerged victorious. That shared experience forged a connection deeper than any I could have ever imagined, an unbreakable tether that no force on earth could sever. As the years passed and Ethan grew into a remarkable young man, I couldn't help but swell with pride at the person he was becoming. Kind, resilient, and possessed of a strength of character far beyond his years. And yet, there were times when I could still see the shadows of Greg's actions lingering in his eyes, a lingering ache that no amount of love or reassurance could fully erase. It was during those moments that I found myself grateful for the harsh sentences handed down to Greg and Marcia. Their selfish, depraved actions had nearly torn our family apart, and they deserved every second of their lengthy prison terms. And as for the family business they had once prized above all else, well, let's just say that without their guiding hands, it wasn't long before the whole empire came crumbling down around them. The construction firm that had once been their pride and joy was liquidated, its assets seized to help fund the legal fees and settlement I had been awarded. It was a fitting end, in many ways, a tangible representation of how their greed and depravity had ultimately led to their downfall. And as I watched the wrecking balls tear into the foundations of their once mighty empire, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cathartic release. They had tried to bury us, to snuff out our lives in pursuit of their own twisted desires. But in the end, it was their legacy that lay in ruins, while Ethan and I stood tall, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Our path forward was far from easy, but we walked it together, hand in hand, a mother and son united by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. And with each step, the shadows of Greg's wrath grew a little fainter, until they were nothing more than distant echoes of a nightmare we had survived. Our future was ours to shape, unburdened by the weight of his malice, or the specter of his cruelty. And as I looked into Ethan's eyes, brimming with hope and determination, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Victors, not victims, masters of our own destiny. The guardians of wrath had fallen, and in their place rose a new generation, tempered by hardship but fueled by love, resilience, and an unshakable faith in the power of the human spirit to triumph over even the darkest of storms. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands as I gripped the phone tighter. Stacy's words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, each syllable a dagger piercing my heart. Evan got another woman pregnant. He's marrying her. The world around me seemed to dissolve into a blur. The chatter of my third-grade students faded into a dull hum, and the colorful classroom walls closed in, suffocating me with their vibrant hues. My legs wobbled, and I stumbled backward, colliding with the desk behind me. A stack of meticulously graded papers scattered across the floor, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The man I had loved, the one I had envisioned spending my life with, had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I fought to suppress the sobs that threatened to escape my trembling lips. I couldn't break down, not here, not in front of my students. "Miss Erin, are you okay?" A small voice piped up, laced with concern. I glanced up, meeting the wide, innocent eyes of little Timmy, one of my brightest students. How could I explain the depth of my pain to a child who knew nothing of such heartache? Forcing a smile that felt like a grimace, I nodded weakly. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little dizzy. Why don't you all go to the library and read quietly until the bell rings?" As the children filed out, their whispers filling the air, I sank into my chair, cradling my head in my hands. The world as I knew it had shattered, and I found myself adrift in a sea of anguish, with no compass to guide me back to shore. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and before I knew it, I was sitting in my car, clutching the steering wheel with a white-knuckled grip. Stacy's words replayed in my mind, each repetition a fresh wound. Evan had betrayed me. The man I had loved, the one I had trusted with my heart, had thrown it all away for another woman. And not just any woman, a woman he had impregnated, a woman he was willing to marry. The weight of his betrayal crushed me, suffocating me with its intensity. I had given him everything, my love, my loyalty, my trust, and he had carelessly tossed it aside as if it meant nothing. Anger simmered beneath the surface, a molten rage threatening to erupt and consume me whole. How could he do this to me? After everything we had been through, after all the promises we had made, how could he so callously discard our love like it was nothing more than a passing fancy? My hands shook as I fumbled with my phone, dialing Stacy's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with concern. "Erin, honey, are you okay?" I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill forth once more. "No, Stace, I'm not okay. I need you. Can you come over?" "Of course." She replied without hesitation. "I'll be right there." As I waited for my best friend to arrive, I couldn't help but wonder how I would ever pick up the pieces of my shattered life. But one thing was certain, Evan had lit a fire within me, a burning desire for revenge that would consume us both in the end. 5 years later, I sat on the plush couch in my cozy living room, sipping a mug of steaming chamomile tea. The scent filled the air, a soothing aroma that helped calm my nerves. Beside me, Jackson flipped through the channels, his arm draped casually around my shoulders. "Anything good on?" I asked, leaning into his embrace. He shook his head, his lips curving into a warm smile. "Nah, not really. Just the usual mindless drivel." I chuckled, setting my mug down on the coffee table. "Well, we could always find something else to occupy our time." Jackson's eyebrows wiggled suggestively, and he pulled me closer. His lips brushing against mine, I melted into his kiss, savoring the warmth and security of his love. In that moment, it was easy to forget the pain of the past, the heartbreak and betrayal that had once threatened to consume me. Jackson had been my anchor, my rock in the storm, and with his unwavering support, I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of Evan's betrayal. The sound of my phone ringing shattered the tranquil moment, and I pulled away from Jackson's embrace with a sigh. Glancing at the caller ID, I felt a familiar knot of tension coil in my stomach. "It's Stacy," I murmured, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Jackson's brow furrowed with concern. "You gonna get that?" I nodded, taking a deep breath before accepting the call. "Hey, Stace, what's up?" "Erin, you're not gonna believe this." Stacy's voice crackled through the line, laced with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "I just ran into Lisa at the mall." My grip tightened on the phone, and I fought to keep my expression neutral. Even after all these years, the mere mention of that name was enough to rekindle the embers of rage that smoldered within me. "What happened?" I asked, my voice deliberately steady. Stacy scoffed, and I could practically see her rolling her eyes. She was her usual, insufferable self, bragging about her perfect life, flaunting her designer bags and her obnoxious diamond ring like she's some kind of goddamn princess. I clenched my jaw, the old wounds of Lisa's betrayal reopening like freshly torn scabs. The memory of her smug, self-satisfied smirk as she revealed her pregnancy with Evan's child still haunted me, a specter of past pain that refused to fade. "And that's not even the worst part," Stacy continued, her voice laced with venom. "She had the audacity to ask me if I'd heard from you lately, like she was gloating about stealing your fiancé right from under your nose." White-hot fury coursed through my veins, and I had to resist the urge to hurl my phone across the room. How dare she? After everything she had done, after the devastation she had caused, how could she still have the gall to flaunt her ill-gotten gains? Jackson must have sensed my mounting rage because he reached out and gently pried the phone from my white-knuckled grip. "Hey, Stacy, it's Jackson," he said, his voice a calming balm against the storm raging within me. "What did Lisa say exactly?" As Stacy recounted the encounter in excruciating detail, I felt the familiar tendrils of a plot start to take shape in my mind. For years, I had tried to move on, to bury the pain and anger that still lingered like a festering wound. But Lisa's callous disregard for my feelings, her blatant disrespect, had reignited a spark deep within me, a burning desire for revenge. Jackson's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own as he listened intently to Stacy's words. When she finally fell silent, he turned to me, his eyes searching my face for any lingering traces of the anguish that had once consumed me. "Aaron," he said softly, "you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can just ignore her, like we've been doing." But I shook my head, my resolve hardening like steel forged in the fires of my fury. "No, Jackson. I'm done ignoring her. I'm done letting her get away with what she did to me, to us." Stacy's voice crackled through the line, a mixture of concern and determination. "What are you thinking, Aaron?" A slow, wolfish grin spread across my lips as I leaned back against the couch, the wheels in my mind already turning. "I'm thinking it's time we paid Lisa and Evan a visit. And this time, we're not going to let them sweep their misdeeds under the rug." The fluorescent lights of the grocery store cast an unflattering glow over the produce section, but that wasn't what had my heart pounding in my chest. No, it was the sight of her, Lisa, standing just a few feet away, idly browsing the selection of apples as if she didn't have a care in the world. Her perfectly coiffed hair and designer handbag screamed of wealth and privilege, a stark contrast to the simple jeans and t-shirt I had thrown on for my weekly shopping trip. Even after all these years, she still managed to make me feel small and insignificant, like a speck of dirt on the bottom of her overpriced pumps. I froze, my hand hovering over a particularly vibrant bunch of bananas as I debated whether to try and slip past unnoticed or confront the source of my lingering anguish head-on. Before I could make up my mind, however, Lisa's gaze landed on me, and a cruel smile twisted her perfectly painted lips. Well, if it isn't Aaron," she purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "Fancy running into you here." My jaw clenched, and I had to resist the urge to hurl the bunch of bananas directly at her smug face. "Lisa," I managed to grit out, my tone clipped and terse. She tutted, shaking her head as if scolding a petulant child. Now, Aaron, is that any way to greet an old friend?" "Friend?" The word felt like a slap in the face, a mockery of everything she had done to me, to us. "We were never friends," I spat, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Lisa merely laughed, a hollow, grating sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. "Oh, come now, don't be like that. We've both moved on, haven't we? Water under the bridge and all that." Moved on? The audacity of her words left me reeling, a white-hot fury bubbling up from the depths of my very soul. How dare she act like she hadn't torn my life apart, like she hadn't stolen the man I loved and crushed my dreams beneath her designer heels? "You think this is water under the bridge?" I hissed, stepping closer until we were mere inches apart. "You think I've just forgotten what you did? How you lied and manipulated your way into Evan's life, into his bed? Lisa's smile faltered for a brief moment, her perfectly sculpted mask slipping just enough to reveal a flicker of discomfort. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that maddening self-assured smirk that made my blood boil. Well, if you ask me, Evan made the right choice, she purred, her eyes raking over me in a dismissive once-over. After all, look at you, still stuck in this dreary little town, doing the same mundane job day after day. He deserved better than that, someone who could keep up with his ambition, his drive. Her words hit me like a physical blow, reopening old wounds that I had thought had long since healed. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let her see me crumble. Refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing just how deeply her barbs had struck. You're delusional, I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Evan was a liar and a cheat, and you're no better than he is. You'll never be happy, not really, because deep down you know you built your perfect little life on a foundation of deceit and betrayal. Lisa's eyes narrowed, her perfectly sculpted mask finally cracking to reveal the ugly truth beneath. A petty, vindictive woman consumed by her own greed and selfishness. You're just bitter, Aaron, she sneered. Bitter and alone, clinging to the past like a pathetic little... Aaron, is everything okay over here? Jackson's voice cut through the tension like a knife, and I whirled around to see him standing there, his brow furrowed with concern. In that moment, I was reminded of just how far I had come, how much I had rebuilt in the wake of Evan and Lisa's betrayal. I had a loving husband, a man who stood by my side through thick and thin, and a life that was far richer and more fulfilling than any of Lisa's material possessions could ever hope to be. Squaring my shoulders, I turned back to face my tormentor, a newfound strength coursing through my veins. You know what, Lisa? You're right. I am bitter. Bitter that I ever wasted a single moment of my life on you and Evan. But I'm also stronger for it, stronger than you could ever hope to be. With that, I turned on my heel, leaving Lisa gaping in stunned silence as I looped my arm through Jackson's and steered us away from the produce section, away from the toxic remnants of my past. As we made our way towards the checkout, Jackson leaned in close, his warm breath tickling my ear. Are you okay? What did she say to you? I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the tension seep out of my muscles as I basked in the love and support that radiated from my husband's touch. It doesn't matter, I murmured, offering him a small, resolute smile. She's not worth it anymore. I'm done letting her hurt me. And in that moment, I knew it was true. Lisa had lost her power over me, her poisonous words no longer able to penetrate the armor of self-worth and confidence I had built around my heart. She was nothing but a bitter memory, a specter of the past that I had finally, truly laid to rest. The envelope was thick and embossed with swirling, metallic script that seemed to mock me with its opulence. I didn't even need to open it to know what it contained. An invitation to Evan and Lisa's 10th wedding anniversary bash, a gaudy celebration of their ill-gotten union. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope, revealing a heavy cardstock invitation adorned with glittering accents and an obscenely long list of extravagant festivities. A champagne toast, a 5-course meal, live entertainment. No expense had been spared in their quest to flaunt their wealth and status. Can you believe the nerve of these people? Stacy's voice crackled through the phone, laced with barely contained fury. After everything they put you through, they have the audacity to invite you to this farce of a party? I swallowed hard, my throat constricting as a wave of memories threatened to drown me. Memories of Evan's betrayal, of Lisa's smug satisfaction as she stole the life I had so carefully built for myself. I don't know what to do, Stace, I admitted, my voice small and tremulous. Part of me wants to just toss this thing in the trash and pretend it never happened, but another part of me burned with a desire for vengeance, a simmering rage that had been stoked by Lisa's taunts at the grocery store. For years, I had tried to move on, to rebuild my life in the wake of their deceit. But no matter how hard I tried, the wounds they had inflicted never seemed to fully heal. You have to go, Stacy insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. You have to go and show them that they didn't break you, that you're stronger than ever. I opened my mouth to protest, but Jackson's voice cut me off before I could utter a word. "Stacy's right," he said, his warm hand settling on my shoulder in a comforting gesture. "You can't keep running from this, babe. You need to face it head-on, once and for all." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I looked up at the man who had become my rock, my unwavering source of strength and support. He had been there for me through it all, holding me together when the weight of Evan and Lisa's betrayal threatened to shatter me into a million pieces. "But what if I can't do it?" I whispered, my voice thick with doubt and fear. "What if I see them and all those old feelings come rushing back, the anger, the pain, the heartbreak?" Jackson's arms encircled me, pulling me into a tight embrace that seemed to chase away the shadows of my past, if only for a moment. "Then we'll deal with it together, like we always do," he murmured, his lips brushing against my forehead in a tender kiss. "You're not alone in this, Aaron. Stacy and we've got your back, always." Stacy's voice piped up, a steely resolve cutting through the tension. "Damn right we do. And you know what? I think it's time we gave those two the reality check they've had coming for years." A slow, wicked grin curved my lips as the seeds of a plan began to take root in my mind. "You're right," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "It is time. Time for Evan and Lisa to face the consequences of their actions, to see their perfect little facade crumble around them." Stacy let out a whoop of delight, her enthusiasm infectious. "That's what I'm talking about. So, what's the plan?" I leaned back in Jackson's embrace, my mind already whirring with possibilities. "Well, for starters, we're going to need evidence. Texts, emails, anything that proves just how far Evan and Lisa were willing to go to get what they wanted." "Consider it done," Stacy vowed, and I could practically hear the determination radiating through the phone line. "And then," I continued, my voice hardening with resolve, "we're going to crash their little party and expose them for the lying, manipulative snakes they truly are. No more hiding, no more pretending everything is just fine. It's time for the truth to come out, once and for all." Jackson's arms tightened around me, a silent show of support and solidarity. "I'm with you, babe," he murmured, "all the way." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For too long, I had allowed Evan and Lisa's betrayal to haunt me, to cast a shadow over my happiness. But no more. It was time to take back control, to reclaim the life they had so callously torn asunder. And this time, there would be no mercy, no quarter given. Evan and Lisa were about to learn the hard way that karma was a bitch, and her name was Aaron. Stacy's living room had become our makeshift war room, the coffee table littered with printouts, photos, and a growing collection of evidence against Evan and Lisa. I shuffled through the stack of documents, my jaw clenching tighter with each damning piece of proof. "Look at this," I muttered, holding up a crumpled sheet of paper. "It's an email from Lisa to one of her friends, bragging about how she landed a real catch with Evan. She even included a photo of the stupid rock he put on her finger." Jackson leaned over, his brow furrowing as he scanned the words. "Unbelievable. She was plotting to steal him from you from the very beginning." "That's not even the worst of it," Stacy chimed in, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard. "I've been digging deeper into Lisa's past, and let's just say our girl has a bit of a history when it comes to going after taken men." She spun the laptop around, revealing a series of social media posts and screenshots that painted a damning picture. Lisa, cozying up to various men at parties and events, all while their unsuspecting partners looked on obliviously. "This one's my personal favorite," Stacy snickered, pointing to a particularly incriminating photo. "That's Lisa getting handsy with her old co-worker's husband at the holiday party. Classy, right?" Anger churned in my gut, a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me from the inside out. How could one person be so utterly devoid of morals, of basic human decency? It was like Lisa had made it her life's mission to destroy relationships and leave a trail of broken hearts in her wake. But this time, she had messed with the wrong woman. "We've got her," I growled, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "We've got all the ammunition we need to take that smug bitch down once and for all." Jackson's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own in a silent show of support. "Easy, babe," he murmured. We don't want to go in half-cocked and screw this up. We need to be smart about this, plan our attack carefully. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to rein in my burning fury. He was right. We couldn't afford any slip-ups, not when the stakes were this high. Evan and Lisa deserved to have their world crumble around them, to feel the same anguish and humiliation they had so callously inflicted upon me. "Okay," I said, squaring my shoulders with a newfound sense of determination. "Here's what we're going to do." For the next hour, we pored over every shred of evidence, dissecting it from every angle and mapping out our strategy down to the smallest detail. We would strike at the anniversary party, the perfect stage to expose Evan and Lisa's web of lies for all to see. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across Stacy's living room, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The nervous energy that had been coiling in my gut had been replaced by a steely resolve, an unwavering certainty that this was the right course of action. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to face my demons head-on and emerge victorious. Stacy reached out, her hand closing over mine in a firm squeeze. "You've got this, Aaron," she said, her eyes shining with a fierce loyalty that warmed my heart. "Those two assholes won't know what hit them," I nodded, offering her a small but genuine smile. "Thanks, Stace, for everything. I couldn't have made it this far without you." "Damn straight," she grinned, her usual brash confidence shining through. "Now, let's go take down those lying cheaters and show them what happens when you mess with Aaron fucking Daniels." A surprised laugh bubbled up from my chest, and I felt the last vestiges of doubt and fear melt away. With my best friend and my husband by my side, I was invincible, a force to be reckoned with. Evan and Lisa had made the biggest mistake of their lives when they decided to cross me, and come hell or high water, they were going to pay for it. The ballroom was a study in opulence, dripping with crystal chandeliers and adorned with elaborate floral arrangements that must have cost a small fortune. Waiters in crisp tuxedos flitted between the impeccably dressed guests, offering flutes of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. It was the kind of extravagant affair that Lisa had always craved, a chance to flaunt her wealth and status like a badge of honor. And as my eyes landed on her, resplendent in a designer gown that probably cost more than my annual salary, I felt a surge of revulsion ripple through me. She was everything I had once wanted to be, poised, polished, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. But now, as I watched her bask in the adoration of her adoring guests, I saw her for what she truly was, a vapid, shallow woman who had built her entire life on a foundation of lies and deceit. Evan was by her side, of course, his arm draped possessively around her waist as he worked the room with a practiced charm that made my skin crawl. He looked every inch the doting husband, but I knew better than anyone the depths of his capacity for betrayal. "You ready for this?" Jackson murmured, his breath warm against my ear as we made our way towards the center of the ballroom. I swallowed hard, steeling my resolve as I nodded. "More than ready. It's time to end this charade once and for all." Stacy fell into step beside us, her chin jutting out defiantly as she sized up our targets. "Just give the word, Aaron. I've been itching to take those two down a peg or 12. A hush fell over the crowd as we approached, our arrival drawing curious glances and whispered murmurs from the assembled guests. I could feel their eyes boring into me, judging and assessing, but I held my head high, my gaze locked on Lisa and Evan. It was Evan who noticed us first, his brow furrowing in confusion as he caught sight of our little trio. "Aaron?" he called out, his voice carrying through the hushed ballroom. "What are you doing here?" Lisa's head whipped around, her perfectly painted lips twisting into a sneer of disdain as she took in my presence. Well, if it isn't the bitter ex," she drawled, her voice dripping with condescension. "I must say, Aaron, you've got some nerve crashing our anniversary party like this." A mirthless laugh bubbled up from my chest as I met her scathing glare head-on. "Your anniversary party? Please, Lisa. We both know this whole thing is nothing more than a sham, a desperate attempt to cover up the ugliness that lies at the heart of your relationship." Evan's eyes widened, his grip on Lisa's waist tightening as he shot me a warning glare. "Aaron, I think it's best if you leave, now." But I wasn't about to be cowed, not this time. Not when I had the truth on my side. a veritable arsenal of evidence to unleash upon their carefully constructed facade. "Or what, Evan?" I challenged, my voice steady and unwavering. "You'll try to gaslight me again? Convince me that I'm the crazy one for calling out your lies and manipulations?" Lisa's eyes narrowed to slits, her perfectly coiffed mask slipping ever so slightly. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing here, but—" "Game!" I cut her off, a harsh bark of laughter escaping my lips. "This is no game, Lisa. This is me finally taking a stand against the two of you and your toxic web of deceit." From the corner of my eye, I could see Stacy and Jackson moving into position, flanking me on either side like loyal soldiers prepared for battle. With a subtle nod, I signaled them to proceed with our carefully laid plan. "You see, while you two have been busy living it up and patting yourselves on the back for your so-called success," I continued, my voice rising to carry over the growing murmurs of the crowd, "we've been gathering evidence. Proof of all the lies, the manipulation, the affairs, everything you've tried so desperately to bury." Stacy stepped forward, brandishing a thick manila folder that bulged with damning documents and photographs. "Care to explain this little gem, Lisa?" she sneered, holding up a printout of the incriminating email I had discovered days earlier. "Or how about all these cozy photos of you cozying up to other men while they were still with their partners?" A hush fell over the ballroom as the assembled guests craned their necks, eager to catch a glimpse of the bombshell revelations unfolding before them. Lisa's face had drained of color, her perfectly composed mask cracking under the weight of our accusations. That's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice trembling with barely contained panic. "Those photos, they're doctored, they're—" "Save it, Lisa," Jackson cut her off, his voice ringing with contempt. "We've got everything we need to expose you two for the lying, cheating snakes you really are. The truth is finally coming out, whether you like it or not." As the pieces of their meticulously constructed facade began to crumble around them, I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. For too long, I had allowed Evan and Lisa's betrayal to haunt me, to cast a shadow over my happiness. But no more. This was my moment, my chance to finally truly move on and leave their toxicity in the past where it belonged. And as I stood there, surrounded by the stunned silence of their once adoring guests, I knew that I had won. The battle was over, and karma had emerged victorious. The ballroom had descended into chaos. Guests were rising from their seats, craning their necks and murmuring in hushed, disbelieving tones as the full weight of our revelations sank in. Evan and Lisa stood rooted to the spot, their faces ashen, their carefully curated masks of polished perfection lying in shattered ruins at their feet. "You can't seriously believe this nonsense," Lisa spat, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and panic. She gestured wildly at the damning evidence Stacy had brandished, her diamond-encrusted fingers glittering like razor-sharp talons. These are lies, twisted and manipulated to make us look bad." A harsh, derisive laugh erupted from somewhere in the crowd, and I followed the sound to see a woman I vaguely recognized as one of Lisa's former coworkers rising from her seat. Her face was contorted in a sneer of contempt as she leveled an accusatory glare at the floundering woman on the stage. "Lies?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "That's rich coming from you, Lisa. Or should I say, coming from the woman who tried to seduce my husband at last year's holiday party?" A ripple of shocked gasps swept through the assembled guests, and I could practically see the cracks in Lisa's facade deepening with each passing second. Her eyes darted wildly from side to side, searching for an ally, a friendly face in the sea of disapproving glares. But there were none. Only a growing tide of outrage and disgust, fueled by the mounting evidence of her misdeeds. That's not true," she stammered, her voice growing shrill with desperation. "I would never." "Save it," the woman snarled, her lip curling in a sneer of revulsion. "We all know what kind of lying, manipulative snake you really are. Hell, I'm surprised it took this long for someone to finally expose you for the trash you are." Lisa recoiled as if she'd been struck, her perfectly coiffed hair falling into disarray as she turned to Evan, her eyes pleading for him to come to her defense. But he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched in a tight, unmistakable expression of shame. "Evan?" Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper, laced with a fragile mixture of hope and dread. "Evan, say something. Tell them they're lying, that they're all lying." But Evan said nothing. He simply shook his head, a weary, defeated gesture that spoke volumes. In that moment, I knew that he understood. Understood that the charade was over, that the carefully constructed facade he and Lisa had spent years cultivating had finally crumbled under the weight of their own lies and deceit. A strangled sob escaped Lisa's lips, and she whirled to face the crowd, her eyes wild and desperate. "You're all fools," she spat, her voice thick with venom. "Blind, pathetic fools who are too caught up in your own petty jealousies to see the truth." Her gaze landed on me, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I saw the mask slip entirely, revealing the ugly, bitter woman that lurked beneath the surface. "This is all you're doing, isn't it, Aaron?" she hissed, her words laced with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You just couldn't let it go, could you? You had to keep picking at the scab, reopening old wounds because you're too damn bitter and miserable to move on with your life." A hush fell over the crowd, all eyes turning towards me as I stood there, unflinching in the face of Lisa's vitriol. I could feel Jackson and Stacy tense beside me, their protective instincts no doubt kicking into high gear. But I didn't need their defense, not anymore. Not when I had finally found the strength and courage to stand on my own 2 feet and face my demons head-on. "You're right, Lisa," I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong across the hushed ballroom. "I couldn't let it go, because what you and Evan did to me, to us, was unforgivable. You lied, you cheated, you betrayed the very foundations of trust and loyalty that are supposed to be sacred in a relationship." I took a step forward, my gaze boring into hers with an intensity that seemed to cut her to the core. "But you know what? I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not miserable. In fact, I'm happier than I've ever been, because I finally have the closure I need to move on and leave your toxicity in the past where it belongs." Lisa opened her mouth, no doubt to spew forth another venomous retort, but I held up a hand, silencing her before she could utter a word. "Save it," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "You've had your turn to spin your web of lies and deceit, but now it's over. The truth is out, and there's nowhere left for you to hide." With that, I turned on my heel, looping my arm through Jackson's, as Stacy fell into step beside us. As we made our way towards the exit, leaving a stunned, shell-shocked Lisa in our wake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation, a weight lifted from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The battle was won, the score finally settled. And as the heavy oak doors swung shut behind us, cutting off the stunned murmurs of the crowd, I knew that I had finally truly left the ghosts of my past behind. It was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh, unburdened by the baggage of Evan and Lisa's betrayal. And this time, nothing and no one was going to stand in my way. The cool night air was a welcome relief as we stepped out of the stifling confines of the ballroom, leaving the chaos and carnage of our truth bomb firmly in our wake. Stacy let out a whoop of unbridled joy, throwing her arms around Jackson and me in a fierce group hug. "Did you see their faces?" she crowed, her eyes dancing with giddy delight. "Lisa looked like she was about to combust, and Evan, oh man, I thought he was going to hurl right there on the stage." A surprised laugh bubbled up from my chest, the tension and fury that had been simmering within me dissipating with each passing second. It was over, truly and finally over. The weight of Evan and Lisa's betrayal, the burden I had been carrying for far too long, had been lifted from my shoulders. "I can't believe we actually pulled it off," I murmured, shaking my head in disbelief. "After all this time, after everything they put us through, we finally got our revenge." Jackson's arm snaked around my waist, pulling me into his side as a proud grin stretched across his face. "Of course we did, babe. Those 2 snakes never stood a chance against us, not when we had the truth on our side." A comfortable silence fell over our little group as we made our way towards the parking lot, the sounds of the city nightlife enveloping us like a familiar embrace. It was in that moment, surrounded by the people who had become my rock, my unwavering support system, that I realized just how far I had come. From the devastation of Evan's betrayal to the hard-won triumph of finally confronting my demons head-on, it had been a long and arduous journey. But through it all, I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and with a newfound appreciation for the unwavering love and loyalty that Jackson and Stacy had shown me. "You know what?" I said, breaking the comfortable silence as we reached Jackson's car. "I think it's time we left all this ugliness behind for good." Stacy arched an eyebrow, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What do you mean? You're not thinking of, moving away or something, are you?" I shook my head, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "No, nothing like that. I just mean, it's time to close this chapter of our lives for good. No more dwelling on the past, no more letting Evan and Lisa's betrayal cast a shadow over our happiness." Jackson's grip on me tightened, his eyes shining with a fierce pride and adoration that never failed to take my breath away. "You're right, babe. We've got a bright future ahead of us, and I'll be damned if we let those two assholes ruin another minute of it." Reaching out, I took Stacy's hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You've been with me through it all, Stace. The good, the bad, the ugly. You've been my rock, my best friend in the truest sense of the word, and I don't know what I would have done without you by my side." Tears glistened in Stacy's eyes, but her trademark grin never wavered. "Oh, shut up, you big sap," she chided, pulling me into a fierce hug. "You know I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. That's what best friends are for, right?" A warmth bloomed in my chest, chasing away the last lingering tendrils of doubt and anguish that had once threatened to consume me. In that moment, surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, I knew that I had everything I could ever need. And then some. "Come on, let's get out of here," Jackson said, jingling his car keys in his hand. "I don't know about you two, but I could really go for a celebratory drink right about now." As we piled into the car, trading jokes and lighthearted jabs, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been a long, winding road, fraught with heartache and betrayal, but in the end, it had led me right here, to a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of unwavering support that money could never buy. And as we pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering facade of Evan and Lisa's party in our rearview mirror, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. A new chapter was beginning, one untainted by the shadows of the past, and I couldn't wait to see what adventures and surprises it had in store. Because this time I knew one thing for certain: no matter what life threw my way, I would never have to face it alone. Not when I had Jackson and Stacy by my side, my own personal army of love and loyalty. Together, we were unstoppable, a force to be reckoned with. And as the city lights twinkled around us, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement for the future that lay ahead, a future written on our own terms, free from the shackles of Evan and Lisa's toxic legacy. It was a new beginning, a fresh start, and this time, nothing and no one was going to stand in our way. I stared at Nate's pale face, tubes snaking from his frail body. His hateful words echoed in my mind, "You'll regret this, you worthless excuse for a mother." I couldn't bear it anymore. A smile crept across my lips as a realization washed over me. "Nate, I've been your stepmother, your caregiver, but today I'm done." For years, I had endured the relentless torment from my ungrateful husband, Mark, and his son, Nate. Mark, a failed writer, constantly demanded I leverage my success as a romance novelist to pitch his sloppy manuscripts to my publisher. Ignoring basic writing rules, he expected me to pave his way, riding on my coattails. Nate was no better. The 16-year-old brat, failing in school, would demand my assistance with his homework, only to mock my profession as trashy romance. His malicious attitude was a constant source of stress, yet Mark turned a blind eye, enabling his son's disrespect. The betrayal ran deeper than I realized. One fateful day, I discovered Mark had been submitting his manuscripts as my own, causing professional havoc. When I confronted him, he dismissed my anger with a wave of his hand, and Nate celebrated his father's deceit openly. I had contemplated leaving, but the fear of damaging my reputation and disappointing my parents held me back. That all changed when Nate got into a severe car accident. As I tended to him in the hospital, he continued his verbal abuse, demanding I pay his medical bills. Nate's aggressive demands and Mark's financial irresponsibility pushed me to my limit. I decided to act decisively, contacting a lawyer to start divorce proceedings and disengage from funding Nate's treatment. No more would I be the doormat for their entitled behavior. I had spent years catering to their every whim, sacrificing my happiness for their selfish needs. But not anymore. It was time to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my freedom. As I stood firm in my decision, Mark's desperation grew more apparent. He would stop at nothing to maintain his parasitic grip on my life and success. "Kelly, please reconsider," he begged, his voice dripping with feigned sincerity. "Think about how this will affect Nate's recovery." I scoffed at his manipulation tactics. "You mean the recovery you can't afford because you've been leeching off my earnings for years?" Mark's eyes narrowed, and he dropped the charade. "Don't act so high and mighty. Without me, you'd be nothing. I'm the real talent in this family." His audacity was staggering. I couldn't help but laugh in his face. "Talent? You call plagiarizing my work and submitting it as your own talent?" Mark recoiled, his cheeks flushing with anger. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing?" I pulled out a stack of printed emails, manuscript drafts, and submission records, slamming them on the table. "The evidence speaks for itself, Mark. You've been passing off my work as yours, jeopardizing my career and reputation." Silence hung heavy in the air as Mark's gaze fell to the damning papers. He knew he was caught, but his ego wouldn't let him admit defeat. "You ungrateful witch," he spat. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" I shook my head in disbelief. "Everything you've done for me? You mean exploiting my success, mooching off my hard work, and enabling your son's disrespectful behavior towards me?" Mark's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, Nate's voice cut through the tension. "Don't listen to her, Dad," he sneered from his hospital bed. "She's just a bitter, jealous hag who can't handle real talent." I turned to face the source of so much torment, finally finding the courage to stand up to him. "Talent? You're one to talk, Nate. You're failing in school, disrespecting your elders, and expecting everyone to clean up your messes." Nate's eyes widened in disbelief, clearly unaccustomed to someone challenging his entitled behavior. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he snarled. "Do you have any idea how much my medical bills are costing? You'll pay for this, you washed-up hack!" I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his threats. For too long I had cowered under their intimidation, but no more. "Pay for it?" I retorted, my voice steady and defiant. "I've already paid enough, Nate. I've paid with years of emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and a complete disregard for my well-being." I turned to Mark, my resolve unwavering. "The divorce papers are being filed, and I'm cutting off all financial support. You two can figure out how to solve your problems without my help." As I walked out of that hospital room, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The shackles of their oppression had been broken, and I was finally free. In the days following my confrontation with Mark and Nate, my resolve only strengthened. I gathered every shred of evidence, documenting their deceit and abuse with meticulous detail. As I pored over the paper trail, the depth of their betrayal became increasingly apparent. Emails, draft manuscripts, even plagiarized passages from my published works, it was all there, a damning indictment of their selfish exploitation. I couldn't believe how blind I had been, allowing them to take advantage of me for so long. But no more. This time, I held all the cards. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, and Mark's attempts at reconciliation grew increasingly desperate. "Kelly, please, think about what you're doing," he pleaded over the phone. "This will ruin us financially. We need your income." I couldn't help but laugh at his audacity. "My income? You mean the one you've been stealing from by passing off my work as your own?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he searched for another manipulative tactic. "What about Nate?" he finally said. "He needs you, Kelly. You're like a mother to him." My blood boiled at the mention of that ungrateful brat's name. "A mother? Is that what he calls me when he's berating me, mocking my career, and demanding I foot his bills?" Mark's voice took on a pleading tone. "He's just a kid, Kelly. He doesn't mean it. We're a family, and families stick together." I couldn't believe the nerve of this man. "A family? You two have done nothing but tear me down and use me as a meal ticket." Well, no more. Before he could respond, I hung up the phone, severing that toxic line of communication. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, and Mark's desperation turned to bitterness. Nate, ever the obedient son, followed suit, lashing out with venomous insults and threats whenever he could. "You're making a huge mistake, Kelly," Nate spat during one of his physical therapy sessions. "Dad and I will make sure you regret this." I simply smiled and shook my head. "Regret? Nate, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." His face contorted with rage, but I remained unfazed. Their threats and tantrums no longer held any power over me. As the court date loomed, I felt a sense of empowerment I had never experienced before. For years, I had been the victim, but now, armed with the truth and supported by an unwavering legal team, the tables had turned. When the day finally arrived, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, ready to face my tormentors and reclaim what was rightfully mine: my dignity, my success, and my freedom. The weeks leading up to Nate's accident were a whirlwind of emotions. As the court date approached, the tension in our household was palpable. Mark and Nate seemed to take turns lashing out at me, their frustration boiling over as the reality of their impending downfall set in. "You're making a huge mistake," Mark would snarl, his face contorted with rage. "Do you really think a judge will side with you over your own family?" I would simply shake my head and walk away, refusing to engage with his baseless threats. I had the evidence, the truth, and a team of skilled lawyers on my side. Their desperate attempts at intimidation held no sway over me. Nate, ever the obedient son, followed his father's lead, hurling insults and accusations whenever our paths crossed. "You're a selfish, pathetic excuse for a woman," he spat one day as I passed by his room. "Dad and I are the real talents in this family. Without us, you'd be nothing." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of his words. For years, they had leeched off my success, plagiarizing my work and exploiting my earnings. And now they had the audacity to claim they were the ones responsible for my achievements. As the court date drew nearer, Nate's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours on end, returning home in a foul mood, reeking of alcohol and defiance. "Where have you been?" I demanded one night as he stumbled through the front door, his eyes glazed over. "None of your business, you miserable hag," he slurred, shoving past me and nearly knocking me over. I wanted to say something to put him in his place, but the words caught in my throat. A part of me still clung to the hope that he would come to his senses, that the boy I had tried so hard to nurture was still somewhere inside that bitter shell. But that hope was shattered the night of his accident. I'll never forget the sound of screeching tires and twisting metal that echoed through the neighborhood. When the police officer showed up at our door, delivering the news that Nate had been in a severe car crash, my heart sank. As I rushed to the hospital, a part of me couldn't help but feel guilty, wondering if the stress of the impending divorce had played a role in his reckless behavior that night. But those thoughts were quickly extinguished the moment I stepped into his hospital room and saw the same look of disdain in his eyes. Well, if it isn't the wicked stepmother herself," he sneered, his voice hoarse from the accident. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the onslaught of abuse I knew was coming. "Nate, I'm just glad you're alive," I said, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. He let out a harsh laugh that quickly devolved into a pained cough. "Alive? For now, maybe. But with the medical bills piling up, who knows how long that'll last without your precious income to support me." I could feel the anger rising within me, but I pushed it down, determined not to let him bait me into a confrontation. "We'll figure it out, Nate," I said, forcing a smile. "Right now, all that matters is your recovery." But as the words left my lips, I knew they were a lie. The time for placating him and Mark was over. The court date was just days away, and I had made my decision. No more would I be their doormat, their meal ticket, or their emotional punching bag. It was time to take back control of my life, no matter the cost. In the days following Nate's accident, the hospital room became a battleground. Every time I visited, he and Mark would unleash a barrage of demands and insults, each one more outrageous than the last. "You need to start paying his medical bills," Mark would declare, his voice tinged with desperation. "We're family, Kelly. You can't just abandon us like this." I would simply shake my head, refusing to be swayed by his manipulation tactics. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Mark. I'm just no longer enabling your toxic behavior." Nate, ever the obedient son, would chime in with his usual venom. "Listen to my dad, you selfish bitch. If you don't start coughing up the cash, I'll make sure you regret it. His threats, once so intimidating, now rang hollow. I had faced down their abuse for too long, and I was finally free from their grip. As the court date loomed closer, their desperation reached new heights. Mark would call me incessantly, begging and pleading for me to reconsider. Nate would hurl insults and accusations, his anger fueled by the realization that his free ride was coming to an end. But I remained steadfast, my resolve unwavering. I had spent years sacrificing my happiness for their selfish needs, and I was done being their emotional and financial punching bag. The night before the court date, I sat down and wrote a letter to Nate and Mark, pouring my heart out one last time. For too long, I've allowed your toxic behavior to dictate my life, I wrote. You've taken advantage of my kindness, exploited my success, and treated me with nothing but contempt and disrespect. I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders with every word. But no more. Tomorrow, I'm taking back control of my life, my dignity, and my future. I'm no longer going to be your doormat or your meal ticket. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a sense of empowerment I had never known before. Tomorrow, the scales of justice would finally tip in my favor, and Mark and Nate would face the consequences of their actions. The next morning, I stepped into the courtroom with my head held high, surrounded by a team of skilled lawyers and armed with a mountain of evidence. As Mark and Nate were brought in, their usual bravado was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a palpable sense of fear and desperation. The proceedings were swift and decisive. My legal team presented a clear and concise case, laying out the years of emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and plagiarism. Mark and Nate's attempts at defense were feeble and unconvincing, their lies and manipulations no match for the cold, hard truth. As the judge rendered his verdict, I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They had lost, and their reign of terror was finally over. Miss Thompson, the judge said, his voice ringing with authority, based on the overwhelming evidence presented, the court has no choice but to grant your request for a full separation of assets and alimony. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. A weight finally lifted from my shoulders. As the bailiffs escorted Mark and Nate from the courtroom, their protests and insults falling on deaf ears, I couldn't help but smile. It was over. The nightmare was finally over, and I was free to start a new chapter in my life, one free from their toxic influence. As I stepped out into the sunshine, I took a deep breath, savoring the sweet taste of victory and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The days following the court ruling were a whirlwind of activity. With the divorce finalized and the separation of assets underway, Mark and Nate were scrambling to salvage what little they had left. Of course, their desperation led them to make one last pathetic attempt at manipulation. "Kelly, please reconsider," Mark begged over the phone, his voice trembling with false sincerity. "We can work this out, I promise. Just give me another chance." I couldn't help but laugh at his audacity. Another chance? Mark, you've had more chances than you deserve. It's over. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he searched for another angle. "What about Nate?" he finally said, his tone shifting to one of concern. "He's just a kid, Kelly. He needs you." I scoffed at the absurdity of his words. Needs me? Nate has made it abundantly clear how little he needs or wants me in his life. As if on cue, Nate's voice chimed in from the background, a string of expletives and insults that only reinforced my point. "See?" I said, my voice calm and resolved. "He's made his choice, Mark. Now it's time for you both to face the consequences." With those words, I ended the call, severing that toxic line of communication once and for all. In the following weeks, the true extent of Mark and Nate's downfall began to unfold. With my income and assets no longer available to them, their facade of success quickly crumbled. Mark lost his job, his employer finally growing tired of his empty promises and shoddy work. Nate, faced with the reality of having to fend for himself, lashed out in anger, his once entitled attitude replaced by a bitter resentment. It was during this tumultuous time that an unexpected ally emerged, my father, John. A retired executive with a vast network of influential connections, he had been a silent witness to my ordeal, offering emotional support and guidance when I needed it most. But now he decided to take a more active role. "They've taken advantage of you for far too long, Kelly," he said, his voice stern but laced with concern. It's time they face the consequences of their actions. With a few well-placed phone calls, my father set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately seal Mark and Nate's fate. Mark's former employer, already disgruntled by his behavior, received a litany of damning reports and testimonials, all detailing his plagiarism and deceit. Within days, he was not only fired but blacklisted from the industry, his reputation in tatters. Nate, still recovering from his accident, found himself facing a harsh reality. With my financial support gone and his father's income evaporating, the prospect of adequate medical care and rehabilitation grew increasingly dim. It was during one of his physical therapy sessions that the weight of his actions finally hit him. "What have I done?" he muttered, his voice small and defeated. "I've burned every bridge, and now I have nothing." As he sat there, surrounded by the consequences of his own entitled behavior, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. But that pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of vindication, a validation that my decision to break free had been the right one. In the following months, Mark and Nate's lives spiraled further into chaos, their once comfortable existence reduced to a struggle for survival. And through it all, I remained steadfast, rebuilding my life and embracing the freedom I had fought so hard for. As I looked back on that tumultuous chapter, I felt a sense of pride and empowerment. I had faced down my tormentors, endured their abuse, and emerged victorious. And while their downfall was of their own making, I couldn't help but relish in the sweet taste of karmic justice. As the dust settled from the initial legal battle, I knew the war was far from over. Mark and Nate, backed into a corner and faced with the harsh realities of their actions, were bound to lash out one last time. And sure enough, their final act of desperation came in the form of a countersuit. "You can't just take everything from us," Mark spat, his voice dripping with venom as we stood before the judge. "We're entitled to a share of your success, your assets, everything." I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. Even after everything, they still clung to the delusion that my achievements were somehow theirs to claim. My lawyer, a skilled and seasoned professional, stepped forward and presented our case with unwavering confidence. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself," he stated, gesturing to the stacks of documents and records that had been meticulously compiled. "For years, Mr. Thompson and his son have engaged in a pattern of emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and outright plagiarism." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in before continuing. "Not only have they leached off of Miss Thompson's hard-earned success, but they've also actively sought to undermine her career and reputation by passing off her work as their own. They have no legal or moral claim to any of her assets or earnings." Mark and Nate shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their usual bravado deflated in the face of such damning evidence. As the proceedings continued, witness after witness took the stand, corroborating my account and painting a clear picture of the mistreatment I had endured. My publisher, my editors, even former colleagues, all testified to Mark's shoddy writing and his desperate attempts to ride on my coattails. Nate's teachers and school administrators spoke of his dismal academic performance and his entitled, disrespectful behavior towards authority figures. With each testimony, the noose around Mark and Nate's necks tightened, their once confident demeanor crumbling as the truth was laid bare. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. As I recounted the years of emotional and financial abuse, the courtroom fell into a hushed silence, the gravity of my words weighing heavily on all in attendance. I spoke of the constant belittling and mockery, the demands for financial support, and the outright theft of my intellectual property. I described the countless sacrifices I had made, the dreams I had put on hold, all in the hopes of maintaining some semblance of a family, only to be met with contempt and manipulation at every turn. By the time I had finished, there was not a dry eye in the room, save for Mark and Nate, who sat stone-faced, their eyes burning with hatred. In the end, the judge's ruling was swift and decisive. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds no merit in the countersuit," he declared, his voice ringing with finality. "Furthermore, we are awarding Miss Thompson full alimony and a substantial sum in punitive damages for the emotional and professional distress she has endured." As the gavel struck, A wave of relief washed over me. It was finally over. The lies, the manipulation, the constant battle for my dignity. I had won, and Mark and Nate were left to face the consequences of their actions. As we exited the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of them, huddled together and whispering furiously. Nate's eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of realization, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of his mistakes. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and the only path forward for them was one of harsh lessons and humbling realities. For me, however, the future had never looked brighter. With the weight of their oppression lifted, I was free to embrace a new chapter in my life, one filled with possibilities and the hard-won freedom I had fought so fiercely for. The morning after the final court ruling, I awoke to a sense of liberation I had never experienced before. For the first time in years, I was truly free. Free from the burden of Mark and Nate's toxic influence, free from the constant demands and emotional abuse, and free to live life on my own terms. As I sipped my coffee on the patio, basking in the warm morning sun, I couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this moment. The years of sacrifice, the emotional turmoil, the legal battles, it had all been worth it to reclaim my dignity and independence. With Mark and Nate's poisonous presence finally excised from my life, a newfound sense of empowerment washed over me. I was in control now, the master of my own destiny, and the possibilities were endless. Over the next few months, I embraced this newfound freedom with open arms. I traveled to exotic locations, soaking in the sights and sounds that would inspire my next literary masterpiece. I indulged in hobbies and passions that had been neglected for far too long, rediscovering the simple joys that Mark and Nate had drained from my life. Wherever I went, I carried with me a sense of pride and accomplishment, a testament to my resilience and unwavering spirit. No longer was I the downtrodden victim, but a survivor, a warrior who had faced down her oppressors and emerged victorious. Of course, there were moments when the echoes of my past would creep in, uninvited whispers of doubt and insecurity, but I quickly learned to silence those voices, to stand tall and bask in the glory of my hard-won freedom. As time passed, the memories of Mark and Nate's cruelty began to fade, replaced by the vibrant tapestry of my new life. Their names, once a source of anguish and torment, became little more than distant specters, ghosts of a past I had left firmly behind. On the rare occasions when I did catch glimpses of their lives, it was through fleeting news reports or whispered gossip, painting a picture of two men brought low by their own hubris and entitlement. Their fall from grace, once a source of vindication, now elicited little more than a passing shrug, a reminder of the consequences of their actions, but nothing more. As for me, my focus remained steadfastly on the future, a future brimming with promise and possibility. I poured my heart and soul into my writing, crafting tales of strength and resilience that resonated with readers around the world. And in those quiet moments when the weight of my journey truly hit me, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, the battles won, and the unbreakable spirit that had carried me through the darkest of times. For too long I had been a prisoner in my own life, shackled by the demands and manipulations of those closest to me. But now, as I stood on the precipice of a new dawn, I was finally free. Free to soar, free to dream, and free to embrace the life fought so hard to reclaim. Claire, what if we never have a child? What if I never become a dad? Mark's voice cracked, heavier than ever. I looked into his eyes and saw someone different, a man carrying an unbearable weight. We'll find a way, Mark. It's not the end of our world, I said, clutching his hand. But as the days went by, I couldn't help but sense the urgency creeping in. I watched as parents strolled with their kids in the park, and my chest tightened with longing. I carried a silent hope each month, only for it to shatter like thin glass. Eventually, we decided to see a specialist. The examination room was sterile, too white and too bright. The doctor's words echoed painfully. Claire, your fertility is quite low. The chances are slim. Mark stared at the floor, not saying a word as we walked to the car. His silence was like a cold wall between us. On the drive home, he finally spoke. That's it, then? His voice was barely above a whisper. I squeezed his knee gently. We'll explore options, Mark. We have to. Weeks turned into months and nothing changed. Mark became more withdrawn, more distant. His eyes had lost their warmth, turning cold and abyss-like. We used to talk about everything, but now our conversations were filled with sighs and empty words. One day, while strolling through the park, he stopped suddenly, watching a group of kids playing. "If I had a kid, we'd be at that park every weekend," he muttered, the bitterness unmistakable. "Mark." I started, but he just shook his head and walked ahead. Then came the fateful announcement. We were having dinner when he dropped the bombshell. "I need to transfer to another state for this new project. Claire, I think it's best if I handle this alone." I felt the ground shaking beneath me. "Alone? You mean you'll be moving?" He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It's just until the project is complete. Maybe some distance will do us good." I wanted to scream, to fight, but instead I just nodded. "All right, maybe it will." Mark packed his things the next morning. The house felt abandoned without him. His side of the bed went cold, and the nights became unbearable. In his absence, I tried to cling to hope. He visited occasionally, bringing gifts and smiling gently like the old Mark I knew. But those moments were fleeting, illusions that faded faster than they appeared. His calls grew sparse, his messages brief. Each day, I wondered if our bond was disintegrating beyond repair. I clutched my phone, waiting for it to buzz with a message, a sign, anything. But hope, much like the children we never had, remained elusive. Weeks turned into months, and the house grew emptier. I couldn't help but hear our unspoken words echoing through the silent rooms, filling the void left behind by fading promises and vanishing dreams. Mark's return wasn't the joyous occasion I'd hoped. I could sense the shift in him immediately. He moved around the house like a ghost, his presence more of a haunting than a comfort. It was a Sunday afternoon when the first blow landed. We were walking back from the grocery store when we passed a dad pushing his child on a swing. "If I had a kid, we'd be at that park every weekend," he said, louder this time, almost daring me to respond. "Mark, we've talked about this," I said softly, trying to keep the peace. "We've talked, but nothing changes," he snapped. "What's the point anymore?" The sharpness of his words stung, and I swallowed my retort, unwilling to escalate the argument in public. The silence between us grew thicker, filled not with unspoken affection but with unaddressed grievances. Then came the announcement. I was chopping vegetables for dinner when he dropped it on me. "I've been transferred. I need to go to Chicago for the next project." "When?" My hand stopped mid-cut. "Next week," he said, not looking up from his phone. "I'm leaving Monday." I felt a pang of betrayal. "So soon? What about us, Mark? Don't we need to talk about this?" "There's nothing to talk about, Claire. This could be good for us," he sighed. "Maybe some distance will help." I wanted to fight, but the fatigue settled in instead. "All right, if that's what you think." He packed hastily that weekend, and Monday came too quickly. The goodbye was mechanical, a quick peck and a mumbled "take care" before he walked out the door. Weeks turned into months. Phone calls were brief, and his words were laced with indifference. He didn't ask about my days, didn't care if I was lonely. The only time he seemed animated was when he talked about work. One rare evening, he FaceTimed me from his new apartment. "Met some colleagues' families today," he said, filling the space with meaningless chatter. "You should have seen their kids, Claire. It made me think, you know." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Maybe the problem isn't just fertility. Maybe." I straightened up, feeling the sting of his insinuation. "What are you trying to say?" "Forget it." And it was that he waved off my concern. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was something large and looming, an elephant in the room simply refusing to acknowledge its presence. "Claire, I think it's best if I extend my stay," he said during another cold clinical phone call. "The project needs more time, and I can't be distracted." I knew it was a lie. "Fine," I replied, but the word felt like swallowing a stone. Our love had become a series of unspoken accusations and unmet expectations, two people orbiting around the same pain without ever addressing it directly. And though I still wore my wedding ring, it felt more like a shackle than a promise. His absence became my constant companion, a relentless reminder of dreams deferred and love eroded by time and disillusionment. When the weekends came, I would sit in the park alone, watching families that could have been ours, feeling the cold winds of impending change. Mark's visits home were infrequent, but strategically timed. Birthdays, anniversaries, the occasional holiday. He came back with expensive presents, trying to paper over the growing cracks in our relationship. One Wednesday evening, he surprised me with a necklace, delicate and glittering under the kitchen lights. "Do you like it?" he asked, his voice oddly eager. I admired the necklace, but something inside me hesitated. "It's beautiful, Mark," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you." He seemed content with my response, quickly moving on to talk about his work in Chicago. "The project is going well. They're even considering me for a promotion." "That's great," I said, trying to match his enthusiasm, but all I could think was how this may only mean more time apart. The visits became a hollow routine. He'd bring gifts, we'd exchange pleasantries, and then he'd leave again. Each time, I thought I saw a flicker of the man I married, only for it to vanish by the time he unpacked his suitcase in Chicago. He called one night, more animated than usual. "The project might be extended," he said, not even bothering to mask the enthusiasm in his voice. "This could mean big things for us. For us or for you?" I couldn't help but question. "Come on, Claire. It's all connected," he shot back, irritation edging his words. I sighed, the weight of everything pressing down. "Whoa, Mark, when will this end?" He didn't have an answer, just more empty words about career opportunities and our supposed future. The hopes I clung to were growing thinner, just like his visits. One Friday, after not hearing from him for weeks, he showed up at our doorstep. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said, holding out a small box. Another trinket, another attempt to glue the pieces back together with material things. "Thank you," I murmured, accepting the gift but feeling none of the joy I once did. Later that evening, we sat on the couch, the silence oppressive. Mark fiddled with his phone, barely engaging in the forced small talk. "Maybe once this assignment wraps up, we can go on a trip," he suggested. "Are you sure you'll even be free, Mark?" The skepticism slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes flashed with annoyance. "Why do you always have to be so negative? I'm doing this for us." "For us," I repeated. "Or for you?" He stood up abruptly. "Fine. If you can't appreciate anything I'm doing, maybe it's better if I stay away longer." His words hit like a punch. "Is that what you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. He paused, staring at me for a moment before replying, "Maybe it is. Maybe some real distance will help us figure things out." And with that, he left just as quickly as he had come. Alone in the quiet house, I turned over his words, trying to find meaning in the chaos our lives had become. I watched the clock, each passing minute a reminder of the increasing distance between us. Our marriage, held together by fragile gifts and broken promises, was slowly unraveling, leaving me with nothing but the lingering scent of his cologne and a growing sense of impending change. Mark returned unexpectedly on a Saturday morning, a tight grip on his briefcase and an expression I couldn't read. I stood in the kitchen doorway, wiping my hands on a towel. "Mark, what's wrong?" he exhaled sharply. "We need to talk." My heart sank as I led him to the living room. We sat down, the tension thick in the air. Without preamble, he said, "There's a colleague of mine who can't raise her baby. She's looking for someone to adopt. Should we consider it?" His sudden proposal stunned me. "Adopt? Without even discussing this? Who is she?" "The mother isn't important, Claire," he said, voice rising defensively. "The baby needs a home." "Of course, the mother matters, Mark. How can we adopt a child without knowing anything about the situation?" His eyes narrowed, the intensity of his gaze almost suffocating. "Why does it matter who the parents are? Do you want this or not?" I felt cornered, the weight of his ultimatum pressing down on me. "I need time to think, Mark. This isn't a decision we can make overnight." He stood up abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. "Well, think quickly. I need an answer soon." We discussed adoption again late into that night, the atmosphere fraught with tension. "I just think we should meet her, at least know her story," I ventured, trying to keep my voice steady. "Claire, why can't you just trust my judgment for once? I know what's best for us." His words felt like a slap. "It's not about trust, Mark. This is a huge decision, and we need to be sure." He slammed his hands on the table, making the dishes clatter. "If you can't accept this, we're done." The finality in his voice left little room for negotiation. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them fall. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll gather my things." I moved through the house mechanically, packing my belongings into suitcases and boxes. Mark watched, his face unreadable, offering no help and no words. By the time the sun rose, I was packed and ready to leave. As I stood at the door, I looked back one last time. "I'll contact a lawyer about the divorce," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Fine," he replied, turning away. I found temporary shelter in a small apartment, its walls closing in on me like the confines of my own despair. The dull hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city were my only companions. The following days were a blur of legal paperwork and muted conversations with my attorney. "We'll make this quick," she reassured me. And so it was. The divorce process moved swiftly, and I started looking for a new job to avoid any chance encounters with Mark at the office we once shared. A legal assistant position opened up, and I grabbed at the opportunity like a lifeline. In the sterile confines of the law firm, I found some semblance of routine. Sarah, my new boss, was kind and understanding, sensing but not prying into my recent turmoil. The work was demanding, but gave me little time to dwell on my broken marriage. Through the long hours and cold nights, I began to rebuild. Mark's shadow still loomed, but with each passing day, I learned to navigate my new reality with a fragile yet growing resilience. It had been weeks since I moved into my tiny apartment, yet the memories of my life with Mark clung to me stubbornly. One evening, I was sorting through old photographs when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe. He sat there, looking more haggard than I remembered. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you." "What's it now, Mark?" I asked, my patience worn thin. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "The adoption option, it's off the table." "Why?" I asked, heart pounding. "What happened?" "She changed her mind," he replied, looking away. "I should have told you sooner." Anger bubbled up inside me. "You put me through all that for nothing? Do you even realize how much you hurt me?" He sighed deeply, as if he were the victim. "I'm sorry, okay? Things just got complicated." "Complicated," I echoed, shaking my head in disbelief. "That's all you have to say?" Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, let's not dwell on the past. How are you doing?" The question was a slap in the face, his attempt at small talk unbearable. "I'm moving on, Mark. Unlike you, I can't afford to linger in the past." I left the cafe feeling no better, but with a renewed sense of determination. Our meeting was the push I needed to let go of any lingering hopes that things might ever change. The next few weeks flew by, with work being my only solace. Each legal document I processed felt like a step further from my old life. One day, during lunch, Sarah approached me. "You seem more focused these days," she noted, handing me a fresh stack of papers. "Just keeping busy," I replied, giving a small smile. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Mark again, his voice strained. "Claire, I found out something disturbing." "What now, Mark?" I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "I think the baby, it might not even be mine," he stammered. For a moment, his words didn't make sense. Then the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. "You had an affair, didn't you?" I demanded. He hesitated before admitting, "Yes." Rage and betrayal coursed through me. "You coward! All this time, you blamed me for everything when you were the one lying." "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but it was too little, too late." Fury sharpened my resolve. The next day, I marched into Sarah's office. "I need to file a claim for infidelity compensation," I stated. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We'll handle it. Are you prepared for this?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. We sent the legal claim to Mark and his mistress, Lauren. The response was immediate and aggressive. Lauren called me, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can just take what's mine?" "You deserve every bit of this," I replied calmly. "You both do." As we hung up, I knew the battle had only just begun. Mark had sown the seeds of his own destruction, and now it was time for him to reap what he had sown. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but at least it was one I was willing to walk alone, with my head held high. Weeks turned into months, and life began to return to a kind of normalcy in my small apartment and new routine. The past seemed increasingly distant until the day I entered the lobby of the law firm and saw Mark, clutching a baby in his arms. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out harsher than I intended. Mark's eyes widened with shock, quickly masked by frustration. "I need your help," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. I motioned him to follow, leading him to a vacant conference room. "Make it quick, Mark," I said, closing the door behind us. "The baby." I'm not sure she's mine, he confessed, looking out of place with the infant in his arms. My mind raced, recalling our last fiery exchange. You want a test, don't you? Yes, he admitted, unable to meet my gaze. Sarah joined us then, her presence commanding and reassuring. What's going on here? Mark explained the situation, but his words were cold and clinical, devoid of genuine remorse. I need to know if she's my daughter, he concluded. That can be arranged, Sarah said, flipping through her notes. I couldn't hold back any longer. How do you live with yourself, Mark, dragging an innocent child into this mess? He looked at me, expression hardening. This is not about you, Claire. This is about what's right for the child. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah intervened, keeping the conversation on track. We'll move forward with the test. You should hear back in a few weeks. Mark mumbled a thank you and left, taking the fragile remnants of our past with him. I watched him go, wondering what had happened to the man I once knew. Those weeks dragged on, filled with a new kind of anticipation. When the results finally came in, Sarah called me into her office. Claire, the child is not his, she said, her tone neutral. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. So he lied about everything, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Seems that way, Sarah said. What do you want to do now? I thought about it, the weight of the situation weighing heavily. I want to move forward with the infidelity compensation. He needs to face the consequences. Sarah nodded, her expression approving. We'll proceed. The legal process was swift, delivering a solid blow to Mark and Lauren. Lauren's reaction was immediate. She stormed into the firm one morning, rage radiating off her. You can't do this. You don't know what he means to me. I met her eyes, unflinching. I know enough to know he deserves this. She left in a fury, but the damage was done. Mark's world began to crumble, and I watched from the sidelines, a complicated mix of relief and lingering sadness within me. Walking away from the situation, I felt a newfound sense of closure. Mark had been exposed, his lies unraveling like the life we once shared. The path ahead was still long, but for now I felt the first breath of freedom in a long time. In those quiet moments, with the dust of the past settling, I found strength in how far I had come. The scars were there, reminders of battles fought and won, but I was ready to embrace the new life that lay ahead, free from the chains of deceit and betrayal. The days following Lauren's fiery visit were filled with a tense anticipation. I knew the infidelity compensation case was moving forward, but each passing day felt like walking on a knife's edge. One evening as I was about to leave the office, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Claire, we need to go over some details, she said firmly. I made my way to her office, where she greeted me with a stack of papers. Mark and Lauren are fighting this with everything they've got, she explained. We need to be prepared for their counter-arguments. I nodded, steeling myself. What's their defense? Typical tactics, questioning your motives, trying to paint you as vindictive, she said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. But we've got solid evidence. Stay strong. The courtroom was a battleground. Mark and Lauren sat on one side, their eyes cold and accusing. I sat across from them, every nerve in my body on high alert. Their lawyer stood up first. This case isn't about justice, it's about revenge. Claire's trying to ruin Mark's life out of spite. Sarah rose to counter, her voice strong and unwavering. This is about accountability. Mark deceived Claire, leading a double life. The emotional and financial damages are clear. Mark took the stand, his face a mask of false humility. I made mistakes, but Claire's actions are extreme, he said, voice dripping with false regret. She's trying to take everything from me. I could barely look at him, the man who once held my heart, now a stranger cloaked in lies. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. Mark broke our marriage vows, not out of some sudden lapse, but through sustained deceit. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice. Lauren's testimony was next, her voice full of indignation. I never meant to hurt anyone, she claimed, tears glistening in her eyes. Mark loves our baby, even if she isn't his. This case is ruining our lives. I clenched my fists, my anger barely contained. Sarah noticed and gave me a slight nod, her silent support bolstering my resolve. After hours of exhausting testimonies and cross-examinations, the judge finally gave the verdict. Given the compelling evidence of infidelity and deception, I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Claire Parker. Compensation in the amount of $50,000 is awarded. Mark's face hardened, his expression unreadable. Lauren sobbed, glaring at me through tear-filled eyes. Sarah and I left the courtroom, and as the doors closed behind us, I exhaled deeply. "We did it," Sarah said, a triumphant smile turning up the corners of her lips. "Yes," I replied, feeling the weight lift ever so slightly from my shoulders. "We did." The news of the ruling spread quickly. Mark's career took a sharp nosedive. Colleagues who once sang his praises now whispered behind his back, and Lauren, true to form, left him soon after the financial blow. In the weeks that followed, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but it came with its own burdens. Mark was left to face the rubble of his life, while I began to welcome the peace and clarity that came with closing a painful chapter. On the advice of friends, I planned a vacation, something to mark my newfound freedom. There was still a long road of healing and rebuilding ahead, but for the first time in a long while, hope felt within reach. As I sat by the window that night, looking out over a city that suddenly seemed full of possibilities, I felt a small but growing sense of calm. The scars would remain, but they were now a testament to my survival, my strength, and the start of a new beginning. The weeks after the ruling were like witnessing the slow disintegration of Mark's life. News of the court's decision spread through our old company like wildfire. Colleagues who once respected him now treated him with thinly veiled disdain. I heard from mutual friends that he'd been demoted, his career prospects obliterated. One evening, I was at the entrance of my new apartment building when I saw Mark standing there, disheveled and haunted. "Claire," he started, voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." "Make it quick," I said. I kept my distance, arms crossed, the defensive stance not lost on him. "I've lost everything," he confessed, his eyes searching mine for any sign of sympathy. "Lauren left me. The baby, she's not mine." I felt an inexplicable pang of pity, but quickly squashed it. "You brought this on yourself, Mark. Every bad decision, every lie, it all led here." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. "I just want you to know I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix everything," I replied coldly, turning and walking inside without looking back. I dedicated myself fully to my work at the law firm, the hustle and bustle becoming a kind of sanctuary. Sarah continued to be my rock, providing both professional guidance and personal support. One Friday afternoon, Sarah approached my desk. "You've been working non-stop, Claire. You should take that vacation you mentioned." "I think I will," I said, smiling for what felt like the first genuine time in ages. I made plans with some friends to go on a week-long trip. The idea of sun and sand, of distant horizons, seemed like the perfect way to cap off this turbulent chapter of my life. On the last day before my vacation, Henry, the head of our firm, called me into his office. "Claire, you've shown remarkable resilience," he said, his tone warm and approving. "We've been discussing your future here, and we believe it's time for you to take on more responsibility." A promotion was being offered. I accepted, feeling a sense of genuine accomplishment. Packing for the trip, I reflected on everything. The pain and betrayal had been like a storm, but now the skies were clearing. Standing on the balcony of my new apartment, I could see the city starting to light up, each glowing window a story of its own. "Time to go," said my friend Julia, honking from the sidewalk below. I grabbed my suitcase and headed out with a smile. The vacation was everything I needed. We laughed, swam, and explored new places, the worries of the past no longer weighing me down. For the first time in years, I felt free. Returning home, I was met with a new sense of purpose. I invested myself fully into my career, the promotion validating my efforts and perseverance. I came back to an unexpected voicemail from Mark. He sounded defeated, seeking closure, or perhaps some final segment of sympathy. I deleted it without listening to it entirely. My life no longer had room for his regrets. In the months that followed, I started planning for more adventures, making new memories that didn't revolve around past traumas. Over time, I found solace not just in my independence, but also in the support from friends and colleagues who rallied around me. In the end, karma had come full circle. Mark had faced his reckoning, and I had found my strength. Standing at the edge of my balcony overlooking the city, I realized that my future was a blank canvas, waiting for me to free from the shadows of my past. As I sipped my coffee, watching the sunrise, I felt a peaceful resolve wash over me. The storm had passed, and a new dawn was breaking, one where I was my own anchor, my life's captain. The journey ahead felt promising, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.